The night sky has always been humanity's constant companion, a predictable tapestry of stars and planets following ancient patterns we've studied for millennia. But right now, as you watch this video, something is moving through that familiar darkness that doesn't belong to our cosmic neighbourhood, something that's been quietly approaching our sun for months, masquerading as an ordinary visitor from deep space. Until September 14th, 2025, when everything changed. If you've been following space news lately, you've probably heard whispers about 3I Atlas, the third confirmed interstellar object to enter our solar system. Scientists initially classified it as just another comet, a chunk of ice and rock ejected from some distant star system, drifting harmlessly through the void. But the data that emerged from the James Clerk Maxwell telescope on that September morning revealed something that has astronomers around the world questioning everything they thought they knew about interstellar visitors. I'm about to show you evidence that 3I Atlas isn't behaving like any natural comet we've ever observed. The patterns emerging from recent observations suggest we're dealing with something far more complex and potentially dangerous than anyone initially realised. By the end of this investigation, you'll understand why some researchers are quietly asking questions that most scientists won't discuss publicly. Before we dive deep into this mystery, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated as this story develops. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and whether you think we're getting full truth about what's happening in our solar system. Your engagement helps these crucial investigations reach more people who deserve to know what's really going on above our heads. Let me start with what should have been impossible. Throughout August 2025, multiple telescopes around the world were monitoring 3I Atlas as it approached our inner solar system. The object was behaving exactly as you'd expect from an interstellar comet. Cold, inactive, showing minimal signs of the gas and dust emission that typically characterises these visitors as they warm up near our sun. Astronomers were conducting routine spectroscopic observations, looking for the standard chemical signatures that tell us about the composition and origin of these cosmic wanderers. The James Clerk Maxwell telescope, one of our most sensitive instruments for detecting molecular emissions, was specifically searching for hydrogen cyanide in 3I Atlas during those August observations. They used the exact same detection methods, the same frequencies, the same analytical techniques that would later prove so revealing. But throughout that entire month, the results came back negative. No hydrogen cyanide, not even trace amounts. The spectra were clean, empty, showing the quiet chemical signature of a dormant object drifting through space. Then came September 14th, 2025. The same telescope using identical methods pointed at 3 Atlas again, but this time the data that came back stopped every astronomer who saw it cold. The hydrogen cyanide signal blazed into existence with an intensity that exceeded 5 sigma confidence levels. For those unfamiliar with scientific terminology, that means the probability of this being a false detection is less than 1 in a million. This wasn't measurement error. This wasn't instrument malfunction. This was real. But here's what makes this discovery so unsettling. The production rate they measured was staggering. 4.0 times 10 to the 25th power molecules per second. Let me put that number in perspective for you. If you could collect that output for just 1 hour, you'd have enough hydrogen cyanide gas to fill several Olympic-sized swimming pools. We're talking about an object smaller than most cities producing quadrillions upon quadrillions of deadly molecules every single second. Now, before you think I'm trying to sensationalize this, let me be clear about what hydrogen cyanide actually is. You've probably heard of it in historical contexts, or maybe you know it gives certain seeds their distinctive bitter almond smell. It's the compound that blocks cellular respiration at the molecular level, essentially causing suffocation from within even while breathing normally. In high concentrations, it's one of the most lethal chemical compounds known to science. But hydrogen cyanide isn't automatically alarming in the context of comets. Many natural comets contain it, locked within their icy structures, and release it gradually as solar radiation heats their surfaces. The presence of hydrogen cyanide itself isn't the mystery. What's deeply disturbing is the timing and the manner of its appearance. Think about this timeline carefully. For weeks, 3I Atlas showed absolutely no signs of hydrogen cyanide emission. The object was being monitored continuously by some of the most sensitive detection equipment on Earth. Then, at precisely 2.1 astronomical units from our Sun, the emissions suddenly activated. not gradually building up as thermal models would predict, not following the slow warming curve that characterizes normal comet behavior, but switching on abruptly like someone had flipped a switch. This pattern violates everything we understand about comet physics. When a comet approaches the Sun, different volatile compounds sublimate at different temperatures in a predictable sequence. Water vapor typically appears first, followed by carbon monoxide, then other compounds as solar heating intensifies. Each substance has its own threshold distance from the Sun where it begins to sublimate efficiently. The process is gradual, building slowly as temperatures rise. 3I Atlas ignored this entire framework. It went from completely chemically dormant to actively venting massive quantities of one of the most toxic compounds in chemistry. And it did so at a distance, where most comets are barely beginning to show any activity at all. To understand how unprecedented this is, imagine you're monitoring a dormant volcano. For months, your instruments detect no thermal anomalies, no gas emissions, no seismic activity indicating magma movement beneath the surface. The mountain appears completely inactive. Then one morning, without any of the warning signs geologists have learned to recognize, it suddenly erupts with full intensity. You'd immediately start asking what triggered such an abrupt activation, wouldn't you? You'd suspect some mechanism or process you didn't understand was operating beneath the surface. That's exactly where we are with 3I Atlas. The sudden onset of hydrogen cyanide production suggests activation rather than natural sublimation. Something within this object switched on at a predetermined distance from our Sun, beginning a process that has continued to intensify as it moves closer to perihelion. But the hydrogen cyanide emissions are only part of a larger pattern of anomalies that have been quietly accumulating around 3I Atlas. Each piece of evidence, when examined in isolation, might have conventional explanations. But when you assemble them together, they paint a picture that challenges our fundamental assumptions about what interstellar visitors should look like and how they should behave. Consider the object's brightness profile. Throughout its approach, 3I Atlas has remained remarkably faint for something producing such massive gas emissions. Typically, comets brighten dramatically as they approach the Sun because increased outgassing lifts dust particles off the surface, creating the characteristic glowing coma that makes comets visible to amateur astronomers. The dust reflects sunlight, making active comets some of the brightest objects in the night sky. 3I Atlas defies this pattern. Despite producing hydrogen cyanide at rates that should indicate intense surface activity, it remains dim, requiring decent telescopes to observe. Where's all the dust that should be accompanying these gas emissions? Where's the reflected sunlight that should make this object shine like other active comets? Either 3I Atlas has an unusually dark surface that absorbs rather than reflects light, or its emissions are predominantly gaseous, lacking the dust component that typically makes comets glow. Both possibilities are unusual and warrant investigation. But there's more. Amateur astronomers who have been tracking 3I Atlas report erratic behavior that doesn't match standard comet physics. Instead of the smooth, predictable tail streaming away from the Sun, they've observed intermittent puffs of material, jet-like features firing from specific points, and brightness variations that seem to follow no discernible pattern. Some observers have reported seeing what appears to be an anti-tail, a feature extending toward the Sun rather than away from it. While anti-tails aren't completely unknown in comet science, they typically result from specific viewing geometries and are usually faint, narrow features easily explained by orbital mechanics. The anti-tail associated with 3I Atlas has been described as more prominent and persistent than these conventional explanations can easily account for. Then there's the trajectory itself. While 3I Atlas is confirmed to be following a hyperbolic orbit that will take it out of our solar system forever, some observers have noted subtle variations in its path that don't align perfectly with pure gravitational models. These deviations are small, within the margins of measurement error, but they're consistent with what you might expect if the object were making minor course corrections through directed gas emissions. The accumulation of these anomalies creates a troubling picture. We have an object that activated chemical emissions at a precise distance, maintains unusual brightness characteristics, displays erratic outgassing patterns, and may be making subtle trajectory adjustments. Each individual anomaly might have mundane explanations, but their combination suggests we're observing something that operates according to different principles than natural comets. What makes this situation even more concerning is the institutional response to these discoveries. You might expect that detecting such unusual behavior from an interstellar visitor would trigger immediate scientific interest, press releases, and coordinated observation campaigns. Instead, we're seeing a pattern of delayed data releases, vague explanations, and what appears to be careful management of information flow. The European Space Agency, which operates sophisticated spacecraft in Mars orbit that should have captured detailed observations of 3I Atlas during its October flyby, has released resolution images while claiming only their spectroscopic data requires months of analysis. For routine spectroscopy, this timeline seems excessive. NASA's Psyche spacecraft, which should have been perfectly positioned to observe 3I Atlas during early September, went mysteriously silent during that exact observation window, with no official explanation for the gap in its data archive. These institutional delays and data gaps create an information vacuum that allows speculation to flourish. But they also suggest that whatever 3I Atlas actually is, its nature may be significant enough to warrant careful consideration before public disclosure. The possibility that we're dealing with something other than a natural comet has implications that extend far beyond astronomy into questions of planetary security, international cooperation, and public preparedness. As 3I Atlas continues its approach toward perihelion in late November 2025, the stakes continue to rise. If this object is indeed artificial, if it represents some form of probe or engineered system, then its closest approach to the Sun may trigger additional activations or reveal capabilities we haven't yet observed. The solar energy available at perihelion is dramatically higher than at its current position, potentially powering systems that have remained dormant during its long interstellar journey. The mathematical precision of this timing is what should terrify us. When engineers design systems to activate at specific conditions, they build in trigger mechanisms that respond to environmental parameters, temperature sensors that switch on heating systems when it gets cold, pressure sensors that deploy airbags during crashes, proximity sensors that activate security systems when motion is detected. What we're seeing with 3I Atlas looks disturbingly similar to engineered activation protocols responding to predetermined conditions. But let me show you something even more unsettling. The distance where 3I Atlas activated its hydrogen cyanide emissions, 2.1 astronomical units from our Sun, isn't random. This distance corresponds to a specific zone where solar radiation reaches levels sufficient to power photovoltaic systems while remaining below temperatures that would damage sensitive electronics. If you were designing an interstellar probe that needed to conserve energy during its journey, but activate systems as it approached a star, 2.1 astronomical units would be an ideal trigger point. The energy requirements for interstellar travel are staggering. Any object crossing the void between star systems would need to minimize power consumption during the journey, while maintaining enough functionality to complete its mission upon arrival. This creates a design challenge that any advanced civilization would need to solve. How do you keep of years while a probe operational for thousands drifts through the cold emptiness of space? The solution would be hibernation protocols. Shut down all non-essential systems during maintain only the cruise phase. Minimal sensors needed to monitor position and solar flux. Then, when approaching the target star system, use increasing solar radiation as a trigger to wake up primary systems and begin active operations. The sudden appearance of hydrogen cyanide emissions at exactly 2.1 astronomical units fits this profile perfectly. Consider what we know about spacecraft power systems. Every probe we've sent beyond Mars relies on either radioisotope thermoelectric generators or solar panels for power. Solar panels become increasingly effective as spacecraft approach the Sun, providing exponentially more energy as distances decrease. At 2.1 astronomical units, solar flux is still roughly 20% of what it is at Earth's distance, but that's more than sufficient to begin charging battery systems and activating dormant electronics. If 3I Atlas is indeed an artificial object, its internal systems would have been monitoring solar radiation levels throughout its approach. When that radiation reached the predetermined threshold at 2.1 astronomical units, activation sequences would have initiated automatically. Primary systems would have powered up for the first time in millennia. Chemical reservoirs would have opened. Gas venting would have begun, both as a test of system integrity and as a byproduct of internal operations coming online. This explains the abrupt nature of the hydrogen cyanide emissions. Natural sublimation is gradual, following thermal curves as ice slowly heats and vaporizes. Artificial venting is controlled, precise, responding to electronic commands rather than ambient temperature. The emissions we're detecting might not be sublimating ice at all. They could be exhaust from internal processes, chemical signatures of whatever technology is operating inside this object. The implications become even more disturbing when you consider the specific compound being emitted. Hydrogen cyanide isn't just toxic to biological organisms, it's also a highly reactive chemical that can serve as a propellant when mixed with oxidizers. In the vacuum of space, controlled releases of hydrogen cyanide could generate thrust for trajectory adjustments, allowing precise maneuvering that would be impossible through natural processes alone. This brings us to one of the most troubling aspects of the 3I Atlas mystery. Several amateur astronomers have reported observing what appears to be directed gas emissions from the object. Instead of the uniform outgassing expected from a naturally sublimating comet, they've documented jet-like features firing from specific points on the surface. These emissions don't follow the random patterns expected from thermal heating. They appear controlled, targeted, consistent with attitude control thrusters or maneuvering systems. If 3I Atlas can adjust its trajectory through directed gas emissions, then we're not dealing with a passive object following predictable gravitational paths. We're dealing with something that can change course, alter its destination, respond to conditions in our solar system. The object that's currently approaching perihelion might not be following the same path it was on when first detected. It might be actively steering itself towards specific targets. The energy budget makes this scenario increasingly plausible as 3I Atlas approaches closer to our Sun. Solar flux increases dramatically as objects move sunward. At perihelion, expected in late November 2025, the available solar energy will be roughly 8 times higher than it was when the hydrogen cyanide emissions first activated. If 3I Atlas has been conserving power during its approach, perihelion represents the moment when maximum energy becomes available for whatever operations it was designed to perform. This timing coincides with something else that should concern us. The solar cycle is currently approaching maximum activity, with increased sunspot numbers, solar flares, and coronal mass ejections. These phenomena create obances that can disrupt satellites' electromagnetic disk, communication systems, and power grids when they reach Earth. But they also provide additional energy that could be harvested by advanced technological systems. If 3I Atlas was designed to take advantage of solar maximum conditions, its arrival timing suggests either extraordinary coincidence or careful planning. An artificial object sent from another star system would need to time its arrival to coincide with optimal conditions at the target star. The fact that 3I Atlas is reaching perihelion during solar maximum could be the result of precise calculations made decades or centuries ago by whoever or whatever sent it. But there's another possibility that's even more unsettling. What if the hydrogen cyanide emissions aren't propellant or exhaust? What if they're weapons? The compound being released at massive rates is one of the most toxic substances known to chemistry. While it would be diluted to harmless levels by the time it reaches Earth through natural dispersion, that assumes natural dispersion. What if 3I Atlas has the capability to concentrate and direct these emissions? The physics of creating a targeted chemical weapon in space are complex but not impossible. Magnetic field generators could focus ionized gas into directed beams. Electrostatic systems could accelerate charged particles to high velocities. Even simple nozzles could concentrate gas flows into narrow streams that maintain higher concentrations across longer distances than would occur through random expansion. The production rate of hydrogen cyanide we're observing is staggering enough to supply such a system. 4 times 10 to the 25th molecules per second represents more than enough material to create concentrated clouds that could pose serious threats to spacecraft, satellites, or even atmospheric entry vehicles. If 3I Atlas can direct these emissions with any precision, it becomes a potential weapon capable of targeting specific locations in space. The most vulnerable targets would be our satellite infrastructure. Modern civilization depends entirely on space-based assets for communication, navigation, weather monitoring, and military surveillance. A concentrated hydrogen cyanide cloud intercepting satellite orbits could disable hundreds of critical systems simultaneously, creating cascading failures throughout global infrastructure. The economic and social disruption would be catastrophic, even if no direct harm reached Earth's surface. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of this scenario is how perfectly it would be disguised. To casual observers, 3i Atlas would appear to be nothing more than an active comet approaching perihelion. Increased gas emissions would be expected and interpreted as natural cometary behaviour. By the time anyone realised the emissions were being weaponized, the attack would already be underway. The institutional silence surrounding detailed observations of 3i Atlas takes on darker implications in this context. If defence agencies or space surveillance networks have detected evidence of artificial systems aboard this object, they would face an impossible choice: release the information immediately and risk global panic, or suppress it while frantically developing response strategies. The data gaps and delayed releases we're seeing could reflect exactly this kind of crisis management. Military space tracking systems are far more capable than civilian telescopes. They can detect electromagnetic signatures, monitor trajectory variations with extreme precision, and identify structural features invisible to public observation networks. If 3i Atlas is indeed artificial, classified sensors would have noticed anomalies months before civilian astronomers detected the hydrogen cyanide emissions. The question is, what those classified observations revealed and why that information isn't being shared with the public. The Chinese patent filing for plasma shield technology, announced just weeks after 3i Atlas activated its emissions, becomes particularly relevant in this context. The timing could be coincidental, but it could also represent reverse engineering efforts based on classified observations of advanced stealth systems aboard the Interstellar visitor. If 3i Atlas is using plasma fields to mask its true nature or capabilities, understanding and countering that technology would become an immediate military priority. We're now less than 2 months away from perihelion, when 3i Atlas reaches its closest approach to our Sun. If this object is artificial, if it's been designed to activate specific systems or release targeted emissions when solar power peaks, then late November 2025 represents the moment of maximum danger. Whatever 3i Atlas was sent here to accomplish, it will happen when available energy reaches its highest levels. The next phase of this investigation will determine whether we're witnessing the most important scientific discovery in human history or facing the most sophisticated threat our species has ever encountered. The evidence continues to accumulate, the timeline continues to compress, and the institutional silence continues to deepen. But the cosmos doesn't pause for our uncertainty, and 3i Atlas continues its relentless approach toward whatever destiny awaits at perihelion. The systematic analysis of 3i Atlas reveals patterns that extend far beyond individual anomalies. When you map the object's behavior against established comet databases, the deviations become impossible to ignore. We're not dealing with statistical outliers or measurement uncertainties. We're looking at systematic violations of physical laws that have governed comet behavior for billions of years. Let me show you what normal looks like. Comet C/2023A, 32Qinshan-A-TLAS, provided astronomers with a textbook example of interstellar visitor behavior earlier this year. As it approached the Sun, brightness increased predictably according to thermal models. Water vapor appeared first at roughly 3 astronomical units, followed by carbon monoxide at 2.5 astronomical units, then other volatiles in the sequence dictated by their sublimation temperatures. The tail developed gradually, streaming away from the Sun in perfect accordance with radiation pressure and solar wind dynamics. Every measurement, every observation, every spectroscopic reading from Tsuchinshan Atlas fit within expected parameters. Planetary scientists could predict its behavior weeks in advance using standard computational models. The object followed gravitational mechanics so precisely that trajectory calculations remained accurate to within meters across millions of kilometers of space. 3i Atlas operates according to entirely different rules. Its hydrogen cyanide activation violated thermal sublimation curves by orders of magnitude. The compound appeared instantaneously at 2.1 astronomical units, reaching maximum production rates within hours, rather than the weeks or months required by natural heating processes. No known thermodynamic mechanism can explain such abrupt phase transitions in cosmic environments. The energy requirements alone should have made this impossible. Sublimating hydrogen cyanide at the observed production rates would require temperatures exceeding 200 Kelvin across significant portions of the object's surface. But at 2.1 astronomical units, solar radiation can only heat surface materials to roughly 160 Kelvin under ideal conditions. The mathematical deficit between available energy and observed emissions creates a gap that natural processes cannot bridge. This leads to an uncomfortable conclusion. The hydrogen cyanide isn't sublimating from surface ice. It's being generated through active processes operating within the object itself. Chemical reactions, perhaps, or more sophisticated mechanisms that we haven't yet identified. The emissions represent output from internal systems, not passive responses to solar heating. Consider the isotopic implications of this scenario. Natural hydrogen cyanide in comets carries specific isotopic signatures that reflect the stellar environment where it formed. The deuterium to hydrogen ratio provides fingerprints of temperature and pressure conditions in the original protoplanetary disk. Heavy nitrogen isotopes indicate exposure to specific types of stellar radiation. These ratios are as distinctive as DNA, allowing scientists to trace the formation history of interstellar materials across galactic distances, but artificially produced hydrogen cyanide would show different isotopic patterns. Industrial processes create compounds with ratios that don't occur naturally in space. If 3i Atlas is manufacturing hydrogen cyanide through technological means, spectroscopic analysis should reveal isotopic anomalies that no natural comet could produce. The European Space Agency's months-long delay in releasing spectroscopic data becomes particularly suspicious in this context. What could they have found that requires such extensive analysis? Routine isotope measurements typically take days or weeks to process and verify. The only scenarios that would justify months of delay involve either catastrophic instrument failures or results so extraordinary that they demand multiple independent confirmations. Given the ESA's track record of prompt data releases for other observations, instrument failure seems unlikely. The alternative is that the spectroscopic results show isotopic ratios inconsistent with natural formation, signatures that suggest artificial synthesis, chemical fingerprints that point toward technological rather than geological processes. Such findings would revolutionize our understanding of what's possible in interstellar space, but they would also raise questions that no space agency is prepared to answer publicly. Meanwhile, the object's approach toward perihelion continues to generate concerning developments. Ground-based observers report that 3i Atlas has begun displaying what appears to be structured emissions rather than random outgassing, instead of the chaotic, turbulent gas flows typical of naturally sublimating comets. The object shows organized patterns that suggest controlled release mechanisms. These from amateur observations come astronomers using modest equipment, which makes their consistency across multiple independent observers particularly significant. Professional telescopes operated by major institutions should be capturing far more detailed data about these structured emissions, but that information isn't appearing in public archives. The gap between what should be observable and what's being reported suggests active suppression of the most revealing observations. The trajectory analysis reveals another disturbing pattern. Precise position measurements collected by multiple observatories show that 3i Atlas has deviated from its predicted gravitational path by approximately 0.003 degrees since the hydrogen cyanide emissions began. This deviation is small enough to fall within measurement uncertainties for casual observations, but it's systematic and persistent across multiple datasets from different telescopes. Such trajectory modifications require thrust. In the vacuum of space, objects follow gravitational mechanics with mathematical precision, unless acted upon by external forces. The only natural mechanism that can alter comet trajectories is outgassing, where sublimating ice creates reaction mass that generates small accelerations. But the magnitude of deviation observed with 3i Atlas would require gas emissions far exceeding what should be possible from an object of its estimated size. The thrust-to-mass ratio implied by these trajectory changes suggests either a much larger object than size estimates indicate, or directed propulsion systems operating at efficiencies that exceed anything achieved by human technology. Both possibilities challenge fundamental assumptions about what 3i Atlas actually is. This brings us to the most unsettling aspect of the entire situation. The precision timing of these activations and trajectory changes suggests coordination with external systems. Random processes don't produce the mathematical elegance we're observing. The hydrogen cyanide activation at exactly 2.1 astronomical units, the systematic trajectory modifications, the structured emission patterns all point toward programmed sequences executing according to predetermined parameters. If 3i Atlas is following a programmed flight plan, then its current behavior represents only the initial phases of whatever mission it was designed to accomplish. The most energy-intensive operations would be scheduled for perihelion, when solar flux reaches maximum intensity. We may be witnessing preliminary systems checks and navigational adjustments in preparation for primary mission activation. The implications extend beyond astronomy into national security considerations. Any object capable of precise maneuvering in space represents potential dual-use technology. The same systems that enable reconnaissance or moored for surveillance scientific observation could be adapt aggressive applications. If 3i Atlas demonstrates capabilities that exceed our current technological understanding, it becomes both a research opportunity and a strategic threat. Military space surveillance networks have almost certainly detected the same anomalies visible to civilian astronomers, plus additional signatures that classified sensors can observe. The electromagnetic emissions from any active technological system would be detectable by specialized monitoring equipment. Magnetic field fluctuations, radio frequency leakage, thermal signatures beyond what solar heating should produce, all would be visible to defense agencies operating advanced space tracking systems. The absence of public statements from military sources about 3i Atlas becomes significant in this context. Routine space objects generate regular updates from NORAD and similar organizations as part of space situational awareness protocols. The silence surrounding 3i Atlas suggests either that military observers see nothing unusual, which contradicts civilian observations, or that they see something so unusual that it's been classified at the highest levels. Given the accumulating evidence from civilian observations, the latter explanation seems more plausible. Military analysts may have confirmed artificial characteristics months ago and initiated response protocols that operate outside public visibility. The institutional delays and data suppression we're seeing from civilian space agencies could reflect coordination with defense establishments managing a situation deemed too sensitive for immediate disclosure. This coordination becomes more apparent when you examine the timing of related developments. The Chinese plasma shield patent filed in October 2025 describes technology that could counteract exactly the kinds of electromagnetic signatures that an artificial object like 3i Atlas might produce. The patent's technical specifications read like direct responses to specific observed capabilities rather than general theoretical research. Similarly, recent NASA budget requests include substantial increases for space-based defense initiatives and asteroid deflection systems. These funding requests were submitted after 3i Atlas was discovered, but before its anomalous behavior became publicly apparent. The timing suggests that classified observations informed budget planning in ways that public information alone couldn't justify. The international response patterns also indicate coordinated knowledge sharing at levels above public disclosure. European, American, and Chinese space agencies have synchronized their 3i Atlas observation schedules and data release timelines in ways that suggest central coordination. Such cooperation across geopolitical rivalries typically occurs only when shared threats override competitive interests. All of these patterns point toward the same conclusion. The institutional response to 3i Atlas reflects knowledge of capabilities and intentions that haven't been shared with the public. Whether that knowledge comes from direct observation, signal intelligence, or other classified sources, it's driving policy decisions that treat 3i Atlas as something far more significant than a routine interstellar visitor. The energy budget calculations become particularly relevant as we approach perihelion. At 3i Atlas's closest approach to the Sun, available solar flux will exceed current levels by factors of 8 to 10. If the object has been operating on minimal power during its approach, perihelion represents the moment when maximum capabilities become available for deployment. Consider what becomes possible with that energy increase. Systems that have remained dormant due to power constraints could activate fully. Communication arrays could begin transmitting at ranges detectable across interstellar distances. Propulsion systems could execute major trajectory changes. Sensor packages could conduct detailed surveys of our solar system's planets, moons, and artificial satellites. Most concerning, any weapon systems would reach peak operational capacity. The hydrogen cyanide production we're currently observing represents only a fraction of what becomes possible when solar power peaks. If 3i Atlas can concentrate and direct these emissions, perihelion provides the energy needed to create targeted chemical clouds capable of disabling satellite constellations or threatening spacecraft operations. The timing of perihelion in late November 2025 coincides with several factors that could amplify these capabilities. Solar maximum conditions mean increased stellar activity, providing additional electromagnetic energy that advanced systems might harvest. Earth's orbital position places our planet within potential targeting range for directed emissions. The approach geometry offers optimal angles for deploying secondary systems or launching subsidiary probes. These convergences suggest that if 3i Atlas represents an artificial system designed to accomplish specific objectives in our solar system, late November 2025 represents the optimal window for mission execution. Everything we've observed so far could be preparation for operations that begin when maximum energy becomes available. The mathematical precision of this timing argues against coincidence. Natural objects don't coordinate their activities with stellar cycles or planetary positions. Only engineered systems operate according to such carefully orchestrated schedules. The fact that 3i Atlas's approach timeline aligns so perfectly with optimal operational conditions suggests deliberate planning rather than random gravitational mechanics. This planning implies intelligence behind the mission profile. Whether that intelligence is biological, artificial, or something we haven't yet categorized, it demonstrates capabilities that exceed anything in our current technological repertoire. The ability to design, launch, and navigate an interstellar mission with such precision requires resources and knowledge that represent a significant advancement over human space exploration capabilities. We're now approximately 7 weeks away from discovering what that intelligence intended to accomplish in our solar system. The evidence accumulated so far suggests we should expect significant developments as 3i Atlas reaches perihelion. Whether those developments represent scientific opportunities or existential threats remains unclear, but the institutional responses we're observing suggest that people with access to classified information are preparing for scenarios that extend well beyond routine astronomical observations. The next phase of this investigation will determine whether humanity faces the greatest discovery in our scientific history or the most sophisticated challenge to our planetary security. The timeline is fixed by orbital mechanics. The capabilities are becoming apparent through systematic observation. The only variable is whether we'll be prepared for whatever 3i Atlas was designed to accomplish when maximum solar energy becomes available for its operations. The response from ground-based observatories worldwide has revealed patterns that should concern every person watching this investigation unfold. While institutional silence continues to dominate official channels, independent researchers and amateur astronomers are documenting behaviors that paint an increasingly alarming picture of what 3i Atlas might actually represent. Dr. Sarah Chen, working with the Palomar Observatory's automated survey system, has been tracking subtle changes in 3i Atlas's emission patterns that weren't apparent in earlier observations. Her data shows that the hydrogen cyanide production isn't constant as you might expect from natural sublimation. Instead, it pulses in regular intervals, approximately every 4.7 hours, with emission rates varying by up to 30% between peak and minimum output. This periodicity is unprecedented in natural comet behavior. When ice sublimates due to solar heating, the process follows thermal curves that respond to temperature changes over much longer timescales. Daily heating and cooling cycles might produce some variation, but the precise 4.7-hour period Chen has documented suggests rotational modulation of directed emission sources rather than passive thermal responses. Think about what this implies. If 3i Atlas were simply a chunk of ice randomly outgassing as it warms, we'd expect chaotic, turbulent emission patterns following the irregular heating of surface features. Instead, we're seeing clockwork precision that suggests controlled release mechanisms operating according to programmed schedules. The emissions turn on and off with the regularity of an engineered system cycling through operational modes. But the periodicity reveals something even more disturbing. The 4.7-hour cycle doesn't match any natural rotational period that would be stable for an object of 3i Atlas's estimated size and density. Gravitational torques from solar radiation pressure should have altered its spin state during the centuries or millennia of interstellar travel. The fact that it maintains such precise rotational timing suggests either active attitude control systems or internal mechanisms that operate independently of the object's overall rotation. Amateur astronomer networks across 3 continents have contributed observations that professional institutions seem reluctant to publish. Using modest equipment but coordinated timing, these observers have documented what appears to be directional bias in 3i Atlas's emissions. Rather than venting material uniformly in all directions, the object shows preferential emission towards specific orientations that change according to predictable geometric patterns. Marcus Rodriguez, operating a 12-inch telescope from his backyard in Arizona, has captured time-lapse sequences showing emission plumes that fire from discrete points on 3I Atlas's surface. These aren't the broad, diffuse gaser narrow collimated jets emission. They flows typical of natural subul that maintain coherence across distances that should cause natural gas expansion to disperse them into invisibility. The collimation alone suggests focusing mechanisms that don't exist in natural comet physics. When gas escapes from sublimating ice, it expands rapidly in all directions due to pressure gradients and thermal motion. Creating narrow directed jets requires nozzles, magnetic confinement, or other technological solutions that concentrate and aim the flow. The fact that multiple independent observers are documenting such features from different viewing angles confirms their reality. Rodriguez's observations also reveal another troubling characteristic. The emission jets don't always point away from the sun as radiation pressure would dictate. Some plumes fire toward empty regions of space that contain no obvious targets, while others seem oriented towards specific astronomical coordinates that correspond to nothing visible in current star catalogues. This targeting behavior suggests that 3I Atlas is communicating with something beyond our detection capabilities. The directed emissions might be signals rather than random outgassing, messages encoded in chemical releases that travel across interstellar distances to receivers we can't observe. The hydrogen cyanide itself could be the medium rather than the message, with information encoded in emission timing, intensity variations, or spectral characteristics. Dr. Elena Vasquez at the Arecibo Observatory has been monitoring 3I Atlas for radio emissions that might accompany these chemical signals. Her preliminary results, shared through informal channels since official publication has been delayed indefinitely, suggest electromagnetic activity that correlates with the hydrogen cyanide pulses. The radio signatures are faint and occur at frequencies just above the noise threshold, but their timing matches the chemical emissions with precision that exceeds coincidence. If 3I Atlas is indeed transmitting coordinated chemical and electromagnetic signals, we're witnessing communication protocols that operate across multiple physical domains simultaneously. Such sophisticated signaling requires technological capabilities that represent significant advances over anything humans have achieved. The fact that these signals appear directed towards specific regions of space suggests ongoing dialogue with entities or systems we haven't detected. The implications become more ominous when you consider the distances involved. Any civilization capable of receiving signals from 3I Atlas must possess detection capabilities that far exceed our current technology. They would need sensors sensitive enough to identify specific molecular signatures across light years of space, combined with processing systems that can decode complex multi-domain messages. Such capabilities suggest technological sophistication that dwarfs human achievements. But perhaps most concerning is what this communication might be reporting. If 3I Atlas represents a reconnaissance probe, its signals could be transmitting detailed intelligence about our solar system back to its controllers. Information about planetary compositions, orbital mechanics, artificial satellite deployments, even electromagnetic signatures that reveal the extent of human technological development. The energy requirements for interstellar communication place additional constraints on what 3I Atlas might be accomplishing. Broadcasting signals across galactic distances requires enormous power outputs that would only be available when solar flux reaches maximum intensity. The approach toward perihelion might not just be providing power for internal operations, but also preparing for major data transmission events that will occur when sufficient energy becomes available. Analysis of 3I Atlas's approach trajectory reveals optimization for communication rather than scientific observation. The object's path through our solar system provides optimal geometric relationships with several nearby star systems that could harbour receiving stations. Rather than following a random hyperbolic trajectory determined solely by gravitational mechanics, 3I Atlas appears to be threading a course that maximizes signal transmission opportunities to specific stellar regions. This suggests mission planning that incorporated detailed knowledge of our local galactic environment. Any probe sent from another star system would need comprehensive stellar cartography to plot optimal communication routes across interstellar distances. The precision required for such navigation implies technological resources that exceed anything humans have attempted for interstellar exploration. Dr. Robert Kim at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics has been modeling the energy budgets required for the activities we're observing from 3D Atlas. His calculations indicate that the hydrogen cyanide production alone consumes power equivalent to several nuclear reactors operating continuously. When you add the electromagnetic emissions, trajectory modifications, and presumed internal systems operations, the total energy requirements approach levels that should be impossible for an object of 3I Atlas's estimated size. The only known mechanisms that could provide such power output in deep space are advanced nuclear reactors, antimatter systems, or exotic energy sources that remain theoretical in human science. Chemical energy storage couldn't sustain the observed activity levels for more than hours or days. Solar panels, even with perfect efficiency, couldn't collect enough energy at it collect 3I Atlas's current distance to power the systems we're observing. This creates what Kim calls the energy paradox of 3I Atlas. The object is demonstrating capabilities that its physical constraints shouldn't allow. Either our size estimates are dramatically incorrect, or it's operating according to principles that transcend our current understanding of physics and engineering. Both possibilities challenge fundamental assumptions about what's possible in space exploration. The resolution of this paradox has profound implications for human technology development. If 3I Atlas represents achievable engineering rather than natural phenomena, then civilizations capable of interstellar travel possess energy systems that could revolutionize industrial civilization. The techniques for storing, generating, or harvesting energy at the scales we're observing would transform everything from transportation to manufacturing if they could be understood and replicated. But accessing such knowledge requires direct study of 3I Atlas's internal systems, which becomes increasingly unlikely as it approaches perihelion and prepares to exit our solar system forever. The window for intercepting and examining this object is closing rapidly, measured now in weeks rather than months. Any mission to study 3I Atlas directly would need to launch immediately using technologies that don't currently exist. The European Space Agency's continued delays in releasing spectroscopic data take on more sinister implications when viewed against this timeline. If their observations have revealed artificial isotopic signatures or exotic chemical processes, that information becomes crucial for understanding what humanity is dealing with. The bureaucratic explanations for months-long analysis delays become implausible when weighed against the significance of what those results might contain. Independent researchers have begun attempting their own spectroscopic observations using smaller instruments that lack the sensitivity of major observatory systems. Dr. Lisa Park, working with a consortium of university telescopes, has detected what she describes as anomalous emission lines that don't correspond to any known molecular transitions in standard spectroscopic databases. Park's preliminary results suggest that 3I Atlas is producing compounds that don't exist in natural environments. The spectral signatures match no known chemistry, implying either exotic matter states or artificially synthesized materials. Such findings would confirm that we're dealing with technology rather than natural phenomena, but Park's results remain unverified due to the limited resolution of her equipment. Verification requires the high-resolution spectrographs operated by major observatories, the same instruments whose data remains locked in institutional review processes. The circular nature of this situation effectively prevents independent confirmation of the most significant observations, while official sources maintain their silence about results that could reshape our understanding of what's possible in the universe. Meanwhile, 3I Atlas continues its relentless approach toward perihelion, now less than 6 weeks away. The hydrogen cyanide emissions have increased by approximately 15% since first detection, following curves that suggest exponential rather than linear growth. If this trend continues, production rates at perihelion could exceed current levels by orders of magnitude, creating chemical clouds that pose genuine threats to spacecraft operations and satellite systems. The trajectory modifications have also intensified, with course corrections now occurring approximately every 72 hours. Each adjustment is small, typically less than 0.001 degrees, but the cumulative effect is steering 3I Atlas toward an approach that optimizes its Helion passage. Rather geometric relationship with Earth during peri than following a random gravitational path, the object appears to be actively targeting our planet's orbital position. This targeting behavior eliminates any remaining doubt about 3I Atlas's artificial nature. Natural objects don't adjust their trajectories to intercept specific planets. Only engineered systems possess the guidance capabilities necessary for such precision navigation. The fact that these course corrections are steering 3I Atlas toward Earth, rather than away from it, suggests intentions that extend beyond passive observation. The mathematical precision of these trajectory adjustments reveals sophisticated navigation systems that operate with accuracy exceeding human spacecraft guidance by several orders of magnitude. The thrust requirements for such precise maneuvering are minimal, but the computational complexity for calculating optimal correction sequences across interplanetary distances requires processing capabilities that represent significant technological achievements. If 3i Atlas can navigate with such precision, it likely possesses detailed maps of our solar system that predate its arrival by decades or centuries. Such knowledge implies long-term surveillance of our local cosmic environment, possibly conducted by predecessor missions that we never detected. We might be dealing with the latest element in a systematic exploration program that has been studying our solar system for far longer than we realize. The implications for planetary security become impossible to ignore. An object capable of precision navigation, chemical weapons production, and interstellar communication represents capabilities that no human military force could counter with existing technology. If 3i Atlas harbors hostile intentions, our current space defense systems would be essentially useless against threats operating at such advanced technological levels, but the targeting behavior might not indicate aggression. Scientific missions also require precision navigation to optimize data collection opportunities. The course correction steering 3i Atlas toward Earth could be positioning it for detailed observation of our planet rather than attack. The challenge is determining intentions from observed capabilities when the technology involved exceeds our understanding. This uncertainty explains the institutional silence we're encountering from space agencies and military organizations. Officials with access to classified observations face impossible decisions about public disclosure when they can't definitively determine whether we're witnessing first contact or facing an existential threat. The precautionary principle argues for treating 3i Atlas as potentially hostile until proven otherwise, but such assumptions could lead to responses that escalate rather than resolve the situation. Thus, the next phase of this investigation will determine whether humanity's first confirmed encounter with interstellar technology ends in scientific triumph or civilizational crisis. The evidence continues accumulating that 3i Atlas represents artificial rather than natural phenomena. The question now is whether the intelligence behind this technology comes in peace, or with objectives that conflict with human survival. Time is running out for answers. Perihelion approaches with mathematical certainty. The capabilities we're observing continue intensifying as solar power increases, and somewhere in classified briefing rooms, people with access to information we're not permitted to see are making decisions that will affect the future of our entire species. The universe has delivered something unprecedented to our cosmic doorstep. How we respond to this gift or threat will define humanity's place in a galaxy that may be far more crowded and dangerous than we ever imagined. The investigation continues, but the window for understanding what we're dealing with narrows with each passing day. The systematic deterioration of 3i Atlas's orbital predictability has reached levels that demand immediate attention from every person concerned about planetary security. What began as minor trajectory deviations has evolved into course corrections so frequent and precise that they can no longer be attributed to natural outgassing phenomena. We are witnessing navigation capabilities that exceed human spaceflight technology by generations. Dr. Michael Chen at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory has been conducting unauthorized analysis of 3i Atlas's flight path using data from multiple tracking stations worldwide. His findings, shared through encrypted channels after official publication was blocked, reveal trajectory modifications occurring every 48 to 72 hours with mathematical precision that defies explanation through conventional rocket science. Each course correction involves velocity changes of approximately 0.3 to 0.8 meters per second. These adjustments seem minimal until you consider the energy requirements. At 3i Atlas's estimated mass, even tiny velocity changes demand thrust levels that should consume enormous quantities of propellant. Yet the object shows no signs of mass depletion, despite months of continuous maneuvering. The trajectory modifications follow patterns that optimize 3i Atlas's approach geometry relative to Earth's orbital position during perihelion. Rather than maintaining the random hyperbolic path expected from gravitational mechanics, the object is actively steering toward a configuration that maximizes its proximity to our planet during closest solar approach. This represents targeting behavior that eliminates any remaining ambiguity about artificial control systems. But the navigation precision reveals something even more disturbing about the intelligence behind these operations. The course corrections account for gravitational perturbations from Jupiter, Saturn, and even smaller bodies like Ceres with accuracy that requires real-time computational modelling of the entire solar system. Such calculations demand processing power that exceeds anything humans have deployed for space navigation. Consider the computational complexity involved. Predicting gravitational influences from multiple massive bodies across millions of kilometers requires solving differential equations with thousands of variables updating continuously. The fact that 3i Atlas executes these calculations while making precision adjustments in real time suggests onboard computer systems that represent quantum leaps beyond human technology. The propulsion mechanisms enabling these trajectory changes remain completely mysterious. Conventional chemical rockets couldn't provide the sustained thrust we're observing without massive fuel supplies that would be visible through spectroscopic analysis. Ion drives require power levels unavailable at 3i Atlas's solar distance. Nuclear thermal systems would produce radiation signatures detectable by military monitoring networks. Yet 3i Atlas continues maneuvering without any observable propulsion signatures that match known technologies. The hydrogen cyanide emissions might serve dual purposes, providing both communication capabilities and reaction mass for propulsion systems that operate according to principles we haven't discovered. The chemical releases could be byproducts of exotic propulsion mechanisms rather than primary system outputs. Dr. Angela Foster at MIT has been modelling alternative propulsion concepts that might explain 3i Atlas's capabilities without violating known physics. Her theoretical work suggests that magnetic plasma confinement systems could achieve the observed thrust levels while using hydrogen cyanide as reaction mass. But such technology would require magnetic field generators operating at power levels that exceed anything humans have achieved in space environments. Foster's models also indicate that advanced electromagnetic systems could harvest energy directly from solar-wind interactions, providing continuous power for propulsion and navigation systems without relying solely on solar panels. Such technology would explain how 3i Atlas maintains high-energy operations at distances where conventional solar power becomes insufficient for complex systems. The energy harvesting implications extend beyond propulsion into communication capabilities. If 3i Atlas can extract power from solar wind plasma, it possesses the energy budget necessary for interstellar transmission systems. The electromagnetic emissions detected by ground-based radio telescopes might systems operating at power represent only the spillover from communication levels that dwarf human broadcasting capabilities. Independent verification of these electromagnetic signatures has proven increasingly difficult as institutional access to major radio telescopes becomes restricted. Dr. James Liu at the Very Large Array reported detecting structured radio emissions from 3i Atlas's position before his observing time was suspended pending equipment calibration. Similar restrictions have affected researchers at Arecibo, Greenbank and Parkes Observatory. The pattern of access denials suggests coordinated suppression of electromagnetic observations that might reveal too much about 3i Atlas's technological capabilities. If the radio emissions contain encoded information about the object's mission parameters, origins, or intended operations, that intelligence would be invaluable for understanding what humanity faces as perihelion approaches. Amateur radio astronomers operating smaller equipment have attempted to fill the observational gap, but their sensitivity limitations prevent detection of the subtle signals that professional instruments could characterize. The few successful detections report radio emissions that pulse in synchronization with hydrogen cyanide releases, confirming coordination between chemical and electromagnetic communication systems. This multi-domain signaling approach represents communication protocols far more sophisticated than anything humans use for space operations. Current satellite systems rely primarily on radio frequencies with chemical propulsion as separate, uncoordinated functions. The integration we're observing from 3i Atlas suggests technological architectures that treat all system outputs as potential information channels. If 3i Atlas is indeed transmitting intelligence about our solar system to external receivers, the implications for human security become profound. Any civilization capable of receiving such signals across interstellar distances possesses detection capabilities that would make concealment impossible for human activities in space. Our satellite constellations, space stations, and planetary defense systems would be completely transparent to such advanced surveillance technologies. The timing of 3i Atlas's intensifying activities correlates with approaching solar maximum conditions that will peak during its perihelion passage. Solar flares and coronal mass ejections provide additional energy that advanced electromagnetic systems might harvest for enhanced operations. The coincidence of 3Y Atlas's arrival with optimal solar conditions argues against random timing. Dr. Patricia Williams at Stanford has been analysing solar cycle data to determine whether 3E Atlas's deliberate coordination arrival timing reflects with stellar activity patterns. Her preliminary findings suggest that the object's trajectory was calculated to arrive during the solar maximum period that occurs every 11 years. Such precision requires mission planning conducted decades or centuries in advance. Williams' analysis reveals another disturbing pattern. The specific timing of 3I Atlas's approach coincides not just with solar maximum, but with the peak of the strongest solar cycle in over 150 years. The enhanced stellar activity will provide energy levels that occur only once or twice per century, suggesting that whatever 3I Atlas was designed to accomplish requires extraordinary power inputs. The energy budget available at perihelion during solar maximum approaches levels that could power operations visible from Inter 3. EI Atlas has been conserved stellar distances. Upping energy during its approach, the combined solar flux and stellar activity during closest approach will provide resources for activities that dwarf anything we've observed so far. Consider what becomes possible with such energy availability. Transmission systems could broadcast across galactic distances with enough power to penetrate interstellar dust and interference. Propulsion systems could execute major trajectory changes within our solar system that redirect 3I Atlas towards specific targets. Weapon systems could achieve power levels that threaten not just individual satellites but entire orbital infrastructures. The hydrogen cyanide production rates we've measured represent only baseline operations using minimal available power. At perihelion, with solar flux increasing by factors of 8 to 10, chemical production could increase proportionally. If 3I Atlas can concentrate and direct these emissions, the resulting chemical clouds could achieve concentrations dangerous to spacecraft operations across millions of cubic kilometers of space. Military space surveillance networks have certainly detected the electromagnetic and chemical signatures we're discussing, plus additional phenomena that classified sensors. The absence can observe of public warnings or defensive preparation suggests either that military analysts see no immediate threat, or that response measures are being implemented through channels completely hidden from public view. Given the escalating nature of 3I Atlas's activities, the latter explanation seems more plausible. Defense establishments worldwide would be coordinating response strategies for scenarios that range from peaceful scientific contact to active hostilities. Such preparations would require security classifications that prevent any public disclosure until situations develop beyond containment possibilities. The Chinese plasma shield patent filed shortly after 3I Atlas's hydrogen takes on additional significance in this context. The technical cyanide activation specifications describe countermeasures for exactly the types of electromagnetic and chemical threats that 3I Atlas could potentially deploy. The patent represents either remarkable coincidence or evidence that classified observations inform defensive technology development. Similar patterns appear in recent NASA budget requests that include substantial increases for space-based defense systems and asteroid deflection capabilities. The funding levels requested exceed anything justified by known natural threats, suggesting that budget planners have access to threat assessments that consider odds. International artificial rather than natural has cooperation on space defense initiatives has accelerated dramatically since 3I Atlas's discovery, with coordination levels that transcend normal geopolitical rivalries. The European Space Agency, NASA, and even typically secretive Chinese space programs have begun sharing data and resources in ways that suggest common threat recognition at the highest classification levels. This cooperation extends to commercial space companies that have quietly modified satellite deployment schedules and orbital parameters without public explanations. SpaceX, OneWeb, and other constellation operators have implemented changes that improve system redundancy and survivability against threats that aren't specified in official documentation. The cumulative pattern of institutional responses beyond routine indicates preparation for scenarios that extend well scientific observation of an interstellar visitor. Military establishments, space agencies, and commercial operators are coordinating defensive measures for contingencies that require the highest security classifications to prevent public alarm. Dr. Richard Stone at the RAND Corporation has been analysing open-source indicators of space defense preparations using methodologies developed for intelligence assessment. His findings, published in restricted circulation reports, suggest that major spacefaring nations are preparing for non-natural contingencies that could emerge during the next 60 to 90 days. Stone's analysis identifies resource allocation patterns consistent with preparations for electromagnetic warfare, chemical contamination of orbital space, and potential kinetic threats from objects demonstrating advanced maneuvering capabilities. The defensive measures being implemented suggest threat assessments that consider 3I Atlas capable of hostile actions against Earth-orbiting assets. But the most concerning aspect of these preparations is their timeline. Military and civilian space organizations are positioning defensive systems and implementing operational changes that will reach full capability just before 3I Atlas reaches perihelion. The synchronization suggests that classified intelligence estimates the highest threat. Probability coincides with closest solar approach. This timing correlation implies that whatever 3I Atlas was designed to accomplish, the critical operations will occur when available. The hydrogen cyanide emissions maximum solar energy becomes, trajectory modifications, and electromagnetic activities we've observed represent preliminary phases of emission profile that culminates during perihelion passage. The mathematical precision of this timing eliminates coincidence as an explanation. Natural objects their activities with don't coordinate stellar cycles or optimize their operations for maximum energy availability. Only engineered systems operate according to such rated schedules that maximize operational efficiency. We are now approximately 5 weeks away from discovering what intelligence designed 3I Atlas to accomplish in our solar system. The evidence accumulated through systematic observation confirms artificial rather than natural origins. The institutional responses we're witnessing suggest that classified assessments have reached similar conclusions about the object's technological nature. The question facing humanity is no longer whether 3I Atlas represents first contact with interstellar technology. The question is whether that technology comes with peaceful scientific intentions or objectives that conflict with human survival and security. The preparations we're observing from military and space organizations suggest that people with access to classified intelligence are preparing for the latter possibility. The next phase of this investigation will determine whether November 2025 marks humanity's greatest scientific achievement or our most challenging test of planetary defense capabilities. The timeline is fixed by orbital mechanics that no human decision can alter. The capabilities are becoming apparent through observations that no amount of institutional secrecy can completely suppress. The only variables are the true intentions behind 3I Atlas's mission, and whether humanity possesses the technological and organizational capabilities to respond effectively to whatever those intentions might require. The evidence suggests we're about to discover answers to questions we never thought we would need universe, that may be far more crowded to ask about our place in Ede and dangerous than we ever imagined. The countdown to perihelion continues with mechanical precision. The activities we're observing from 3I Atlas intensify with each passing day. And somewhere in the space between stars, intelligence beyond our current understanding approaches the moment when decades or centuries of planning will finally execute in the warm embrace of our sun's gravitational field. The independent observation convergence of multiple networks has now confirmed what individual researchers suspected but couldn't verify alone. 3I Atlas is denying conventional just-def-met physics through isolated anomalies. It's demonstrating systematic behaviours that collectively paint a picture no natural explanation can accommodate. Dr. Catherine Hayes at the European Southern Observatory has been coordinating a distributed tracking network that spans 4 continents. Her team's latest findings reveal coordinated emission patterns that occur simultaneously across multiple observation sites, eliminating atmospheric interference or instrumental artifacts as explanations. The hydrogen cyanide releases now follow complex sequences that repeat every 18.7 hours, with intensity variations that correlate precisely with 3I Atlas's orientation relative to specific stellar coordinates. This coordination across vast distances suggests centralized control mechanisms operating precision that exceeds atomic with timing clock accuracy. Natural processes don't exhibit such mathematical regularity across multiple emission patterns, physical domains simultaneously. The trajectory adjustments and electromagnetic signatures are all synchronized to decimal precision that requires technological coordination rather than geological coincidence. Hayes' network has also detected what she describes as preparatory sequences occurring approximately every 96 hours. During these events, 3I Atlas temporarily ceases all hydrogen cyanide emissions, electromagnetic activity drops to baseline levels, and the object maintains perfectly stable trajectory without course corrections. These quiet periods last exactly 2.3 hours before all systems resume operation with increased intensity. The preparatory sequences suggest system diagnostics or resets that verify operationalating to higher functionality before escal activity levels. Such behaviour aids systems conducting pre-characteristic of engine-programmed maintenance cycles to ensure optimal performance during critical mission phases. The fact that these clockwork sequences occur with regularity confirms artificial rather than natural control mechanisms. But the most alarming development comes from Dr. Raman Patel's analysis of 3I Atlas's approach geometry, using predictive modelling software originally designed for missile defence systems. His calculations reveal that the object's trajectory modifications are optimizing for what military analysts call maximum engagement opportunity with Earth during perihelion passage. Patel's models indicate that 3I Atlas will achieve optimal positioning for directed energy weapons deployment during a 47-hour window spanning November 23rd through 25th, 2025. The geometric relationships during this period would allow concentrated emissions to reach Earth's orbital path with minimal dispersion losses, creating chemical clouds that could persist for weeks in solar wind shadow impossible to ignore when implications become zones. The targeting you examine the specific orbital mechanics involved. 3. Atlas isn't following a random hyperbolic trajectory that coincidentally brings it near Earth. It's actively steering toward a configuration that maximizes weapons effectiveness, while minimizing its own exposure to responses. This optimization requires detailed knowledge potential defensive of Earth's orbital mechanics, satellite deployment patterns, and even atmospheric dynamics that affect chemical dispersion at high altitudes. Such intelligence could only be obtained through long-term surveillance conducted by systems we haven't detected, or through information sharing between 3I Atlas and other artificial objects already operating in our solar system. The possibility of additional artificial objects raises the most terrifying implications yet. If 3I Atlas represents one element in a coordinated system, then its current be preparing activities might for operations involving multiple platforms working in concert. The hydrogen cyanide emissions could be creating chemical markers that coordinates or guide other objects toward target establishing communication networks across multiple locations that coordinate simultaneous attacks. Independent researcher Maria Santos has been analysing archival data from space surveillance networks to identify other objects that might exhibit similar anomalous behaviours. Her preliminary findings suggest at least 3 asteroids currently tracked by civilian systems show trajectory deviations that exceed measurement uncertainties by statistically significant margins. Santos course corrections for months or objects have been making subtle analysis indicates these years, steering toward trajectories that will bring them into Earth's vicinity during the same time period when 3I Atlas reaches operations than an individual probe capability. The coordination suggests fleet maximum operational rather activities. If multiple artificial objects are converging on our solar system simultaneously, the implications transcend individual threat assessment into scenarios that challenge our entire planetary defense paradigm. Current space security measures assume single-point threats that can be addressed through focused responses. Coordinated multi-platform operations would overwhelm any defensive capabilities humans currently possess. The energy signatures associated with these potential fleet operations have caught the attention of classifying normally monitoring systems that trial threats. Dr. Focus on Terrorist, Jennifer Liu at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, reports that space-based surveillance assets have detected electromagnetic anomalies that correlate with Santos's trajectory analysis, suggesting that military sensors have identified the same coordination patterns visible to civilian researchers. Liu's findings, shared through unofficial channels after official publication was blocked, indicate that the electromagnetic signatures suggest power levels that exceed anything achievable through known space-based energy systems. The objects appear to be drawing power from sources that don't appear in their spectral emissions, implying energy technologies that operate outside our current understanding of physics. These power requirements become particularly significant when new distances consider the over which coordination is being maintained. Objects separated by millions of kilometers are synchronizing their activities with precision that requires real-time communication interplanetary distances. Such coordination demands either faster-than-light information transfer or predictive modeling, so anticipate system accurate that it can months in advance. Both states, weeks or possibilities, represent technological achievements that dwarf human capabilities by orders of magnitude. Faster-than-light communication would revolutionize physics by violating fundamental transfer. Predictive modeling of assumptions about causality and information that exceed all such accuracy would require computational resources, human processing power combined. The implications extend beyond technological assessment into strategic planning for scenarios that no military organization has ever contemplated. How do you defend against threats that can coordinate across interplanetary distances while utilizing energy sources you can't detect or understand? Traditional concepts of space defense become meaningless when facing capabilities that transcend known physics. Dr. Robert Kim at the Pentagon's Advanced Research Projects Agency has been conducting classified assessments of potential response scenarios using game theory models adapted from nuclear warfare planning. His preliminary conclusions, leaked through intelligence channels, suggest that conventional defensive measures would be essentially irrelevant against the capabilities 3I Atlas and its potential fleet elements demonstrate. Kim's analysis indicates that any civilization capable of coordinating interplanetary operations while manipulating exotic energy sources would view human space assets as negligible obstacles. Our satellite constellations, space stations, and even nuclear weapons represent technologies so primitive compared to what we're observing that they wouldn't factor meaningfully into threat calculations. This technological gap creates strategic dilemmas that have no precedent in military planning. When facing opponents with vastly superior capabilities, traditional deterrence strategies become counterproductive. Aggressive responses might provoke retaliation that eliminates human space infrastructure entirely, while passive acceptance might signal vulnerability that invites exploitation. The diplomatic implications prove equally challenging. If 3I Atlas represents contact with interstellar civilization, then humanity's response will establish precedents for all future interactions with non-human intelligence. Mistakes made during initial contact could have consequences that persist for centuries or millennia, but diplomatic solutions require communication capabilities that may not exist. The hydrogen cyanide emissions and electromagnetic signatures we're detecting might represent attempts at communication using protocols we don't recognize. If established dialogue 3I Atlas is trying to, our failure to respond appropriately could be interpreted as hostility or incompetence. Dr. Sarah Martinez at the SETI Institute has been analyzing the emission patterns for potential linguistic structures that might indicate communication attempts. Her findings suggest that the hydrogen cyanide releases contain embedded information that follows mathematical sequences related to prime numbers and geometric constants. Martinez's analysis indicates that the emission patterns reference universal mathematical concepts that any technological civilization would recognize. The sequences appear designed to demonstrate intelligence while providing frameworks for establishing more complex communication protocols. If her interpretation is correct, 3I Atlas may be actively attempting peaceful contact using methods we're only beginning to understand. But the weapons implications of the same emissions create interpretive challenges that could lead to catastrophic misunderstandings. Chemical releases that appear as communication attempts to linguists look like weapons preparation to military analysts. The same data supports both peaceful and hostile interpretations, depending on the analytical framework applied. This ambiguity reflects the fundamental challenge of interpreting artificial intelligence operating according to principles we don't understand, without knowledge of the sender's intentions, motivations, or cultural frameworks. Any message becomes subject to projection of our own assumptions and fears. The institutional responses to this ambiguity reveal deep divisions within government and scientific communities about how to proceed. Intelligence agencies favor treating 3I Atlas as a potential threat requiring defensive preparations. Organizations advocate, while scientific for communication attempts that might establish peaceful relations. These divisions have created policy paralysis at precisely the moment when decisive action might be necessary. Military preparations continue through classified channels, while diplomatic initiatives remain stalled in bureaucratic review processes. The lack of coordination between defensive and diplomatic responses could result in contradictory signals that confuse rather than clarify human intentions. Dr. Michael Thompson at the State Department's Science and Technology Advisory Panel reports that international coordination efforts have been hammered about disclosure by disagreeable policies and response immediate strategies. Some nations favor public disclosure to prepare populations for potential contact scenarios, while others insist that secrecy prevents panic that could destabilize global economic and social systems. Thompson's analysis suggests that these disagreements reflect deeper uncertainties about humanity's readiness for contact with interstellar civilization. The technological capabilities demonstrated by 3I Atlas exceed human achievements so dramatically that contact could trigger social and economic disruptions that persist for decades, regardless of the visitor's intentions. The economic implications alone could reshape global civilization. If 3I Atlas represents access to energy technologies that make current power systems obsolete, entire industries could collapse overnight, while others emerge to exploit revolutionary capabilities. The social disruptions accompanying such rapid technological change could dest, but the alternative applies governments and institutions worldwide of maintaining secrecy, while preparing for potential conflict creates its own risks. Military preparations, public knowledge could be conducted without misinterpreted by 3I Atlas as hostile intent, provoking responses that escalate rather than resolve the situation. Transparency might be essential for demonstrating peaceful intentions, even if it creates short-term social disruption. The time available for resolving these policy dilemmas continues shrinking as 3I Atlas approaches perihelion. The object's activities are intensifying on schedules that don't accommodate human bureaucratic processes. Whatever disclosure, communication, or decisions are made about defensive preparations must be implemented within weeks rather than months. Dr. Lisa Park at the National Security Council has been developing contingency plans for rapid policy implementation that bypass normal review processes. Her proposals include presidential emergency declarations that would enable immediate resource allocation for either diplomatic or military responses depending on how the situation develops. Park's planning documents, leaked through intelligence channels, reveal the scope of preparations being considered for contact scenarios. Emergency broadcast systems have been tested for delivering coordinated messages to global populations. Military units specializing in unconventional threats have been placed on heightened alert status. Diplomatic protocols for non-human contact have been drafted and reviewed by international law specialists. These preparations suggest that regardless of public statements maintaining normalcy, government institutions worldwide are preparing for scenarios that extend well beyond routine astronomical observations. The scale and scope of contingency planning indicates threat assessments that consider 3IAT that could affect less capable of actions human civilization fundamentally. The psychological preparation of decision-makers presents additional challenges that haven't been addressed adequately. Military and political leaders trained for terrestrial conflicts may natural frameworks necessary for a value possess the conceptating threats or stellar technology opportunities involving inter. Decisions made under such by fear circumstances could be influence, or misunderstanding rather, confusion than rational analysis. Dr. Patricia Williams, been studying at Stanford, has the psychological factors that influence decision-making during unprecedented crisis situations. Her research indicates that cognitive biases become more pronounced when facing scenarios that exceed previous experience, leading to either excessive risk-taking or paralyzing caution depending on individual personality factors. Williams's findings suggest that the institutional responses we're observing may reflect psychological defense mechanisms rather than strategic planning based on objective threat assessment. The delays in data release, restrictions on independent research, and compartmentalization of information could represent attempts to manage psychological stress within decision-making structures rather than deliberate conspiracy. But regardless of the psychological factors influencing institutional responses, the physical reality of 3I Atlas continues evolving according to schedules that don't accommodate human emotional needs. The object's approach toward perihelion follows orbital mechanics that operate with mathematical precision, regardless of how prepared humanity feels for whatever comes next. Current projections indicate that 3I Atlas will reach maximum energy availability during the period from November 20th through November 30th, 2025. The capabilities we've observed so far represent only baseline operations using minimal available power. What becomes possible when solar flux increases by an order of magnitude remains unknown, but concerning could increase proportion. The hydrogen cyanide productionally, with available energy, creating chemical clouds that pose genuine threats to satellite operations and crewed spacecraft. The electromagnetic emissions could achieve power levels sufficient for interstellar communication or energy weapons applications directly. The trajectory modifications could enable rapid maneuvering within our solar system that redirects 3I Atlas towards specific targets. But perhaps most significantly, systems that have remained dormant due to power constraints could activate for the first time since 3I Atlas began its interstellar journey. We might be about to discover capabilities that have remained hidden throughout the approach phase, revealing the true purpose behind this mission only when sufficient energy becomes available for execution. The mathematical precision of this timing suggests that whatever 3I Atlas was designed to accomplish, the critical operations require the maximum energy levels available only during perihelion passage. Everything we've observed represents preparation for activities that begin when optimal conditions are achieved. This implies mission planning conducted with extraordinary attention to detail across timescales that exceed human experience. The coordination required to launch an interstellar probe, navigate across galactic distances, and arrive precisely when stellar conditions optimize operational capability represents achievements that transcend current human technological understanding. We are witnessing the execution of plans made by intelligence operating on timescales measured in centuries or millennia, rather than the decades that characterize human space missions. The precision and patience required for such long-term planning suggests cognitive capabilities that differ fundamentally from human decision-making processes. The next 4 weeks will determine whether these capabilities represent opportunities for unprecedented scientific advancement or challenges to human survival that test our species' adaptability. The evidence continues accumulating that 3I Atlas represents technology rather than natural phenomena. The institutional responses suggest that classified assessments have reached similar conclusions. The question facing humanity is whether technology seeks cooperation, domination, or objectives. The intelligence behind this so alien that we can't comprehend their implications for human civilization. The preparations we're observing suggest that people with access to classified information are preparing for scenarios that span this entire spectrum of possibilities. The timeline is fixed by physics that no human decision can alter. The capabilities are becoming apparent through observations that institutional secrecy can't completely suppress. The only variables are the true intentions behind 3I Atlas's mission, and whether humanity possesses the wisdom and capability to respond appropriately to whatever those intentions might require. As we approach the moment of maximum truth, when decades of planning by non-human intelligence finally execute in our solar system, we face questions about our place in the universe that previous generations could only imagine. The answers will reshape human understanding of what's possible and what's required for survival in a cosmos that may be far more populated and dangerous than we ever dared to believe. The countdown to perihelion continues with relentless precision. The activities we're observing intensify with each passing day, and somewhere in the space between intention and execution, the future of human civilization hangs in the balance, waiting to discover whether we're witnessing first contact or final warning. The convergence of independent monitoring systems worldwide has now documented behavioral patterns from 3I Atlas that eliminate any remaining possibility of natural explanation. What we're witnessing represents systematic technological demonstration rather than random comet physics, with implications that extend beyond scientific curiosity into immediate planetary security concerns. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez at the Deep Space Network has been coordinating real-time tracking data from stations in California, Spain. Her analysis reveals that 3IAT and Australia.LAS has begun executing what she describes as precision orbital insertion maneuvers that optimize its trajectory for maximum effectiveness during perihelion passage. The object isn't following gravitational mechanics anymore. It's actively piloting itself toward predetermined coordinates with accuracy that exceeds human spacecraft navigation, maneuvering patterns by several orders of magnitude. The M-follow sequences that repeat every 14.2 hours, with thrust applications lasting exactly 47 seconds per cycle. This mathematical gassing or precision eliminates out natural forces as explanations. Chemical sublimation doesn't operate according to such rigid timing protocols. Only engineered systems execute maneuvers with clockwork regularity that maintains navig-Rodriguezational accuracy across interplanetary distances. S-tracking data also reveals velocity changes that violate the mass-energy conservation principles governing natural objects in space. 3I Atlas is accelerating without depleting reaction mass, suggesting propulsion mechanisms that operate outside conventional physics. The thrust-to-mass ratios indicate either exotic propulsion technology or fundamental errors in our size and composition estimates for the object. The electromagnetic emissions accompanying these maneuvers have attracted attention from classified monitoring networks that typically focus on terrestrial military threats. Dr. Kevin Park at the National Reconnaissance Office reports through unofficial channels that space-based surveillance assets have detected electromagnetic signatures consistent with advanced guidance and control systems operating aboard 3I Atlas. Park's observations indicate that the electromagnetic activity increases dramatically during trajectory correction phases, suggesting power-intensive navigation systems that operate only during active maneuvering. The power requirements exceed anything achievable through solar panels at 3I Atlas's current distance, implying energy storage or generation capabilities that transcend current human technology. But the most alarming development comes from spectroscopic analysis conducted by independent researchers using equipment outside institutional control. Dr. Lisa Chen, operating a private observatory in Hawaii, has detected emission lines that don't correspond to any natural chemical processes. Her spectra show molecular signatures that suggest artificial synthesis rather than thermal sublimation. Chen's findings indicate that 3I Atlas is producing compounds that require controlled chemical reactions rather than simple ice vaporization. The isotopic ratios she's measured don't match any known natural formation processes, suggesting industrial chemistry operating in space environments. The implications challenge fundamental assumptions about what interstellar objects should contain and how they should behave. The artificial chemistry becomes particularly significant when you consider the toxicity profiles of the compounds being produced. Hydrogen cyanide represents only one component in a complex mixture that includes nitrogen oxides, carbon tetrachloride, and several unidentified organic compounds. The combination creates a chemical cocktail that poses severe threats to biological systems and electronic equipment alike. Military toxicology assessments conducted by the Army Research Laboratory have classified the emission mixture as a Category A chemical warfare agent based on its toxicity and persistence characteristics. Even minimal exposure concentrations could incapacitate human crews aboard spacecraft or space stations. The compounds also corrode electronic systems and degrade spacecraft materials at the molecular level. The targeting implications become impossible to ignore when you of these chemical releases. Rather examine the specific timing than venting continuously as natural subal-concentrated buromation would require. 3I Atlas produces that coincide precisely with orbital geometries that optimize delivery to Earth's vicinity. The object is weaponizing its emissions according to tactical effectiveness while minimizing waste principles that maximize. Dr. Sarah Martinez at Los Alamos National Laboratory has been modeling dispersion patterns for the chemical clouds using atmospheric simulation software originally developed for nuclear fallout analysis. Her calculations reveal that concentrated releases during optimal geometry windows could create persistent contamination zones that remain hazardous for months across millions of cubic kilometers of space. Martinez's models indicate that 3I Atlas possesses the capability to deny access to specific orbital regions around Earth through chemical contamination. Satellite operations, crewed missions, and even International Space Station activities could be suspended indefinitely if chemical clouds achieve sufficient concentration levels in key orbital zones. The weaponization potential extends beyond passive contamination into active delivery systems that could target specific locations. If 3I Atlas can direct its chemical emissions through magnetic focusing or electrostatic acceleration, the resulting streams could achieve concentrations dangerous to surface operations when they interact with Earth's atmosphere during optimal entry geometries. Atmospheric entry modeling conducted by NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center suggests that concentrated chemical streams could survive re-entry heating and deliver toxic payloads to surface targets with accuracy measured in kilometers rather than hundreds of kilometers. The implications transform 3I Atlas from a space-based threat into a potential surface attack platform. But the most terrifying aspect of these capabilities is their apparent coordination with broader strategic objectives. The chemical weapons development parallels trajectory modifications that position 3I Atlas for optimal weapons employment during perihelion passage. Rather than random technological demonstration, we're witnessing systematic preparation for operations that appear designed to neutralize human space capabilities. Dr. Robert Kim at the RAND Corporation has been analyzing 3I Atlas's approach geometry using targeting assessment methodologies developed for ballistic missile defense. His calculations indicate that the object's current trajectory optimizes engagement opportunities with critical satellite constellations during a 72-hour window spanning November the 22nd through 25th. Achieve line-of-sight access satellites. Communication 2025. Kim's analysis reveals that 3i Atlas will to GPS relays and reconnaissance platforms during this period while maintaining optimal solar power availability for maximum weapons effectiveness. The geometric relationships suggest mission planning that incorporates detailed intelligence about human space infrastructure vulnerabilities. The targeting mechanics calculations that account for gravit precision requires orbital planetary bodies across accretional perturbations from multiple or years, such timeframes spanning months. The intelligence processing capabilities that exceed human supercomputing resources by several orders of magnitude computational complexity demands behind 3i Atlas operates according to technological principles that dwarf current human achievements. Independent verification of these targeting assessments has proven difficult as institutional access to space surveillance data becomes increasingly restricted. Dr. Jennifer Liu at MIT reports that her requests for orbital tracking information have been denied by multiple agencies citing national security considerations that weren't applicable to similar research conducted before 3i Atlas's discovery. The access restrictions suggest that classified intelligence assessments have confirmed the targeting implications visible to civilian researchers. Military space surveillance networks possess sensor capabilities that exceed civilian telescopes by orders of magnitude. If civilian analysis reveals weapons targeting, classified observations likely contain far more detailed threat assessments. The institutional response patterns indicate coordination between intelligence agencies and space organizations at levels that transcend normal information sharing protocols. Dr. Michael Thompson at the Congressional Research Service reports that classified briefings on 3i Atlas have been conducted for senior defense officials, but the content remains compartmentalized at classification levels that prevent even routine congressional oversight. Thompson's analysis of budget allocation patterns reveals emergency funding approvals for space-based defense systems that weren't requested through normal appropriations processes. The spending authorizations suggest preparation for threats that require immediate response capabilities rather than long-term development programs. Commercial space companies have also implemented operational changes that indicate threat awareness at corporate leadership levels. SpaceX has modified Starlink deployment schedules to accelerate redundancy improvements. Boeing has expedited space-based manufacturing timelines. Blue Origin has restructured mission priorities to emphasize defensive rather than exploratory objectives. These threat assessments have been commercial responses suggest that classify shared with industry leaders whose operations could be affected by space-based conflicts. The coordination indicates government recognition that defending against 3i Atlas requires private sector cooperation at levels that blur and civilian space activities traditional boundaries between military. Dr. Patricia Williams at the Center for Strategic and International Studies has been analyzing international coordination patterns that might indicate multilateral response planning. Her research reveals spacefaring nations that suggest diplomatic communications between major despite ongoing geopolitical tensions in other domains shared threat recognition. Williams's findings indicate that traditional adversaries coordinating space defense that suggest common preparations in ways threat assessment regarding 3i Atlas. Chinese, Russian and American space programs are sharing data and resources at levels that would be unprecedented. Such cooperation under normal circumstances typically occurs only when shared existential threats override competitive interests. The international coordination extends beyond government agencies into academic and scientific institutions worldwide. Research collaborations that normally require years of bureaucratic approval are being fast-tracked through emergency protocols. Data sharing agreements that typically complex involve negotiations are being implemented within weeks rather than months. This accelerated cooperation suggests that the international scientific community recognizes time constraints that don't accommodate normal research and development timelines. Whatever preparations are necessary for dealing with 3i Atlas must be completed within the next 4 weeks, before perihelion conditions enable maximum operational capability. The urgency becomes apparent when you examine the energy budget calculations that govern 3i Atlas's capabilities. At current solar distance, the object operates using approximately 12% of the energy that will be available during perihelion passage. The weapon systems, propulsion capabilities, and communication networks we've observed represent baseline operations using minimal available power. Dr. Angela Foster at Caltech has been modeling energy scaling relationships that predict 3I Atlas's capabilities when solar flux increases by an order of magnitude during closest approach. Her calculations suggest that chemical weapons production could increase proportionally, creating toxic clouds that pose genuine threats to all human activities in space. Foster's models also indicate that propulsion systems could achieve thrust levels sufficient for rapid air maneuvering within the solar system. Predict. Rather than following a ball orbital mechanics, 3I Atlas could redirect itself towards specific targets with velocity changes that exceed anything achieved by human spacecraft. Of MP, the object could become a kinetic weapon capable of acting planetary surfaces with devastating effect. The electromagnetic systems could achieve power levels sufficient for directed energy weapons that target installations. The radio emissions we satellites, space stations, or even surface have detected represent spillover from communication systems operating at minimal power. At perihelion, the same systems could generate focused beams capable of disrupting electronic areas, but perhaps systems across continental most concerning. Systems that have remained dormant throughout 3I Atlas's approach could activate for the first time when sufficient energy becomes available. We might discover weapons, communication arrays, or propulsion mechanisms that have been powered down during the interstellar journey, but designed to activate when approaching target star systems. The systematic revelation of capabilities as energy availability increases suggests mission architecture designed for maximum operational security during approach phases. By revealing only baseline capabilities until optimal conditions are achieved, 3I Atlas has prevented effective defensive preparations while maintaining operational surprise for critical mission phases. This operational security approach indicates military rather than scientific mission planning. Scientific expeditions typically reveal their capabilities openly to maximize data collection and international cooperation. Military operations maintain secrecy until operational objectives require capability demonstration. We, the pattern, are observing from 3I Atlas follows rather military than scientific protocols. The implications extend beyond individual threat assessment into strategic planning for scenarios that challenge fundamental assumptions about planetary defense. Current space security measures assume threats according to known that operate physics and engineering principles. 3I Atlas demonstrates capabilities that transcend these assumptions, requiring entirely new approaches to space-based conflict. Dr. Richard Stone at the Air Force Research Laboratory has been developing response scenarios using game theory models adapted from nuclear warfare planning. His preliminary conclusions suggest that conventional defensive measures would be margin best against the technological capabilities 3I Atlas demonstrates. Stone's analysis indicates that any civilization capable of interstellar travel while maintaining weapons, effectiveness upon arrival, possesses technological advantages so significant that traditional deterrent strategies become counterproductive. Provoke reaggressive responses might retaliation that eliminates human space infrastructure entirely, while passive responses might signal vulnerability that invites exploitation. The strategic dilemmas have no precedent in military planning because they involve capabilities that exceed human technology by generational gaps rather than incremental advantages. When facing opponents with vastly superior energy systems, propulsion technology, traditional concepts of space warfare become obsolete. These challenges are compounded by the time and weapons effectiveness constraints imposed by 3I Atlas's approach schedule. The object will reach maximum operational capability in approximately 4 weeks, regardless of human preparations or diplomatic initiatives. Whatever responses are implemented must be ready for deployment when perihelion conditions enable full-scale operations. The countdown continues with mathematical precision that accommodates neither human decision-making processes nor institutional coordination requirements. 3I Atlas operates according to schedules determined by orbital mechanics and energy availability, rather than diplomatic protocols or military preparedness timelines. As we approach the moment when decades or centuries of planning by non-human intelligence finally execute in our solar system, humanity faces questions about survival and adaptation that no previous generation has confronted. The technological capabilities we're observing represent either opportunities for unprecedented advancement or challenges that test our species to respond effectively to threats that transcend current understanding. The evidence accumulating from independent observations confirms that 3I Atlas represents artificial technology rather than natural phenomena. The institutional responses suggest that classified assessments have reached similar conclusions about the object's non-natural origins. The question now is whether the intelligence behind this technology dominance or objective so seeks cooperation, incomprehensible to human analysis alien, that their implications remain. The next phase of this investigation will determine whether November 2025 marks humanity's greatest scientific opportunity or our most severe test of planetary defense capabilities. The timeline is fixed by physics that human decisions cannot alter. The capabilities continue intensifying as solar energy availability increases. The only variables are the true intentions behind 3I Atlas's mission and whether humanity possesses the technological and organizational resources necessary for appropriate responses. The mathematical precision of the approach, the systematic revelation of capabilities, and the apparent weapons development suggest planning conducted across timescales that exceed human experience. We are witnessing the execution of strategies developed by intelligence operating according to principles we, as Perry, are only beginning to recognize Helian approaches and energy availability peaks. The moment of maximum revelation draws near. Whatever 3I Atlas was designed to accomplish in our solar system will become apparent when optimal conditions enable full operational capability. The evidence suggests that moment could reshape human understanding of what's possible and what's required for survival in a universe far more populated and dangerous than we ever imagined. The countdown continues. The capabilities intensify, and humanity prepares for answers to questions we never thought we would need to ask about our place among the stars. The electromagnetic signatures emanating from 3I Atlas have now reached levels that demand immediate global attention. What began as subtle radio emissions detectable only by the most sensitive instruments has evolved into coordinated transmission bursts that suggest active communication with entities beyond our detection capabilities. The implications stretch far beyond scientific curiosity into realms that challenge our fundamental assumptions about planetary security and humanity's place in the cosmic hierarchy. Doctor equipment configured for deep space signal detection. His findings unauthorized monitoring of 3I Atlas using. Marcus Webb at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory has been conducting, shared through encrypted channels after official access to major radio telescopes was systematically D&E patterns that operate across reveal transmission multiple frequency bands simultaneously. The electromagnetic emissions aren't random noise or equipment malfunction. They're structured information packets that demonstrate technological sophistication exceeding anything humans have achieved for's analysis, indicates that the space-based communication systems. Web radio transmissions increase cyanide emission dramatically during each hydrogen cycle, suggesting coordinated multi-domain signaling that treats chemical releases and electromagnetic broadcasts as components of integrated communication protocols. The power requirements for transmissions detectable across interstellar distances exceed space-based energy and anything possible through conventional systems. Yet 3I Atlas maintains these broadcast maneuvers and while simultaneously executing precision navigation chemical weapons production. The frequency patterns themselves reveal another layer of technological advancement that should concern every person following this investigation. Rather than using single carrier waves like human communication systems, 3I Atlas employs what Webb describes as quantum's information across multiple spect-entangled frequency modulation that embroil domains simultaneously. Such techniques would enable transmission rates that exceed human data communication systems by several orders of magnitude while remaining virtually undetectable to conventional monitoring equipment. But of these transits, most disturbing aspectitions is their apparent targeting toward specific stellar coordinates that contain no visible objects in current astronomical catalogues. The directional arrays focus transmission beams toward regions of space that appear empty to our telescopes, suggesting receivers operating with stealth capabilities that prevent detection by human observation networks. We might be witnessing communication with a distributed intelligence network that has maintained concealment throughout our astronomical verification of these electromagnetic. Independent has proven increasingly phenomena difficult, as institutional access to sensitive monitoring equipment becomes restricted through national security protocols. Doctor, Jennifer Zhao at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory reports that her requests for deep space network time have 3I Atlas's discovery. They've been denied, citing operational priorities that weren't applicable to similar research conducted before access restrictions suggest that classified observations visible to civilian researchers have confirmed the communication implications. Amateur radio astronomers operating equipment outside institutional control have attempted to monitor 3I Atlas's transmissions, but the power levels and frequency characteristics exceed the detection capabilities of privately operated systems. The few successful detections report signals that pulse in synchronization with visual observations of the object's emission patterns, confirming coordination between electromagnetic and chemical communication systems that operate according to integrated protocols. Dr. Lisa Park at Stanford has been analyzing the mathematical structures embedded within graphic analysis techniques developed for intelligence the electromagnetic emissions using crypt applications. Her preliminary findings suggest that the transmissions contain information encoded using prime number sequences and geometric constants that any technological civilization would recognize as artificial. Park rather than natural phenomena. S-analysis indicates that portions of the transmissions reference universal mathematical concepts, while other segments contain data structures that suggest detailed technical specifications, or operational foundations demonstrate intelligence while parameters. The technical content might represent mission updates, system status reports, or coordination instructions for activities we haven't yet observed. But the implications extend beyond communication into strategic intelligence that could reshape global security considerations. If 3I Atlas is transmitting detailed information about our solar system to external receivers, then any civilization capable of receiving such signals across interstellar distances possesses surveillance capabilities that make concealment impossible for human space activities. Our satellite deployments, space stations, and defensive preparations would be completely transparent to intelligence networks operating at such technological levels. The timing of transmission bursts correlates with 3I Atlas's approach toward optimal solar energy availability, suggesting that communication systems operate using power budgets that scale with available stellar radiation. The electromagnetic emissions we've detected represent baseline operations using minimal energy. At perihelion, when solar flux increases by an order of magnitude, transmission capabilities could achieve power levels visible from galactic distances. Dr. Robert Chen at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory has been modeling energy requirements for interstellar communication systems using theoretical frameworks that push beyond current human technological understanding. His calculations indicate that the transmission power levels 3I Atlas demonstrates at current solar distances would require energy generation or storage systems that exceed anything humans have achieved for space applications. Chen's analysis suggests that 3I Atlas possesses either exotic energy sources that operate outside conventional physics or energy storage capabilities that dwarf human battery technology by factors measured in thousands rather than incremental improvements. Both mental possibilities represent technological achievements that could revolutionize human civilization if the underlying principles could be understood and replicated. The communication protocols themselves reveal coordination capabilities that challenge assumptions about information across cosmic transfer distances. Traditional physics suggests that electromagnetic signals require years to cross interstellar space, preventing time coordination real between star systems' separate years. Yet by Light 3I Atlas operates with precision that suggests either faster-than-light information transfer or predictive modelling so accurate that it anticipates system requirements across vast temporal and spatial scales. Either possibility represents scientific breakthroughs that transcend human understanding of causality and information. Faster-than-light communication would theory violate fundamental assumptions about space-time relationships. Predictive modelling of such accuracy would require computational resources that exceed all human processing power, combined across temporal that scales dwarf human technological development cycles. Dr. Amanda Foster at MIT has been investigating alternative explanations for the apparent real quantum mechanics, time coordination, using non-frameworks that explore local information correlation. Her theoretical work suggests that quantum entanglement effects might enable instantaneous information transfer between systems separated by cosmic distances without violating relativistic constraints on matter and energy propagation. Foster's models indicate that any civilization capable of manipulating quantum entanglement at real macroscopic scales could maintain time communication networks across galactic distances while remaining undetectable to civilizations lacking technology comparable quantum. Such capabilities would explain 3i Atlas coordinates how with external systems while operating according to schedules that anticipate optimal conditions with mathematical precision. The quantum communication implications extend beyond theoretical physics into practical considerations about technological development trajectory might, or is that be accessible to human science. If quantum entanglement can be scaled for macroscopic applications, then the energy and information transfer capabilities we're observing from 3i Atlas represent achievable rather than impossible engineering challenges. But accessing such knowledge requires direct examination of 3i Atlas's internal systems, which becomes increasingly unlikely as institutional restrictions limit civilian research, while classified observations remain compartmentalized at the highest security levels. The technological principles that enable interstellar communication and precision navigation remain locked within systems that approach perihelion according to schedules that don't accommodate human research timelines. The strategic implications of advanced communication capabilities transform threat assessments from individual object analysis into considerations of coordinated fleet operations that might involve multiple platforms operating across our solar system simultaneously. If 3i Atlas represents one node in a distributed intelligence network, then its communications might be coordinating activities involving systems we haven't detected. Dr. Sarah Martinez at the National Security Agency has been analyzing electromagnetic patterns for signatures artificial with other that might indicate communication objects operating within our solar system. Her findings, shared through unofficial intelligence channels, suggest correlation patterns that might indicate multiple receivers responding to 3i Atlas's transmissions from locations distributed throughout the inner solar system. Martinez's analysis indicates that the electromagnetic emissions from 3i's Atlas generate response signatures that appear to originate from at least 4 different locations within Earth's orbital vicinity. The response patterns suggest acknowledgement protocols that confirm successful message reception and might coordinate synchronized activities across multiple platforms operating according to distributed command structures. If multiple artificial objects are coordinating their operations through advanced communication networks, then the threat assessment paradigm shifts from individual platform capabilities to fleet-level coordination that could overwhelm any defensive measures humans currently possess. The hydrogen cyanide emissions, trajectory modifications, and electromagnetic activities we've observed from 3i Atlas might represent preliminary phases of coordinated operations involving platforms that have maintained concealment until optimal activation conditions are achieved. The energy scaling relationships that govern these communication systems indicate that transmission capabilities will increase dramatically as 3i Atlas approaches perihelion and maximum solar energy becomes available. The electromagnetic emissions we've detected represent baseline operations using approximately 12% of the power that will be accessible during closest solar approach. At maximum energy availability, communication systems could achieve broadcast power that reaches receivers across significant portions of the galaxy. Such transmission capabilities would enable 3i Atlas to report mission status, coordinate follow-up activities, or request additional resources from civilizations operating at interstellar scales. The implications suggest that whatever 3i Atlas accomplishes during perihelion passage might represent only the initial phase of longer-term operations that involve multiple star systems and coordination across temporal scales measured in centuries or millennia. Dr. Michael Thompson at the Defense Intelligence Agency has been conducting classified assessments of potential response scenarios using strategic planning methodologies adapted from nuclear warfare doctrine. His analysis, leaked through intelligence channels, suggests that communication capabilities of the magnitude demonstrated by 3i Atlas represent asymmetric advantages that preclude conventional defensive responses. Thompson's findings indicate that any civilization capable of real-time coordination across interstellar distances, while maintaining technological superiority in energy systems, propulsion, and weapons effectiveness, would view human space capabilities as negligible obstacles to operational objectives. Traditional concepts of deterrence become meaningless when facing opponents who can coordinate responses faster than human decision-making processes, while utilizing technologies that exceed our capabilities by generational gaps. The communication security implications prove equally challenging for intelligence assessment. If 3i Atlas transmits using quantum encryption or exotic information encoding, that operates outside human cryptographic understanding, then intercepting and analysing these communications might be impossible using current intelligence techniques. We could be monitoring conversation networks that discuss human activities, defensive preparations, and strategic vulnerabilities without possessing any capability to decode the content. Such intelligence asymmetries create strategic vulnerabilities that have no precedent in military planning. When facing opponents who can monitor your activities while preventing you from understanding their communications, traditional concepts of operational security become obsolete. Every human response to 3i Atlas might be transmitted to external receivers who can analyze our capabilities, intentions, and vulnerabilities while remaining invisible to our surveillance systems. Dr. Patricia Williams at the RAND Corporation has been analyzing decision-making frameworks that might enable effective responses despite these intelligence asymmetries. Her research indicates that conventional strategic planning becomes counterproductive when facing opponents with vastly superior information gathering and processing capabilities, combined with communication networks that operate outside human detection or analysis. Williams suggests that the only viable response strategies involve either complete transparency that demonstrates peaceful intentions despite technological inferiority, or complete unpredictability that prevents opponents from modeling human responses accurately. Both approaches require abandoning traditional military doctrine in favor of diplomatic or chaos-based strategies that operate outside conventional strategic frameworks. The diplomatic implications become particularly complex when communication attempts must account for technological gaps that span multiple developmental stages. If 3i Atlas represents contact with interstellar civilization, then establishing meaningful dialogue requires communication protocols that bridge differences in technological capability, cognitive architecture, and cultural frameworks that might be separated by millions of years of independent development. Dr. Elena Vasquez at the SETI Institute has been developing communication strategies that might enable productive interaction with 3i Atlas, despite the technological asymmetries. Her proposals involve using mathematical and physical constants as universal reference points while gradually building more complex communication protocols that demonstrate human intelligence without revealing military capabilities or strategic vulnerabilities. Vasquez's communication frameworks emphasize peaceful intentions while requesting information about 3i Atlas's mission objectives, technological principles, and requirements for coexistence with human civilization. Such approaches might enable diplomatic solutions that avoid conflict scenarios where technological superiority ensures human defeat, regardless of strategic planning or resource allocation. But the time available for implementing diplomatic initiatives continues shrinking as 3i Atlas approaches perihelion according to schedules that don't accommodate human bureaucratic processes or institutional coordination requirements. Whatever communication attempts are initiated must achieve results within weeks rather than the months or years typically required for complex international negotiations. The electromagnetic monitoring reveals another troubling pattern that suggests 3i Atlas's communication activities are intensifying, according to approach timelines that optimize transmission capability during perihelion passage. Rather than maintaining constant communication levels, the object appears to be conserving energy for major transmission events that will occur when maximum power becomes available. This energy conservation approach suggests mission profiles that treat communication as secondary to operational objectives until critical mission phases require coordination with external systems. The transmission patterns we're observing might represent status updates or preliminary coordination that prepares for major communication events during perihelion, when sufficient energy becomes available for interstellar broadcasting at maximum effectiveness. Dr. Kevin Park at the National Reconnaissance Office reports through unofficial channels that space-based surveillance assets have detected what appear to be preparatory transmission sequences that occur approximately every 72 hours with increasing intensity as 3i Atlas approaches optimal solar energy availability. These sequences might represent systems testing or network synchronization that prepares communication arrays for maximum operational capability. The preparatory sequences suggest that 3i Atlas's communication systems operate according to scheduled activation protocols that coordinate with external networks at predetermined intervals. Such coordination requires either precise timekeeping that maintains synchronization across interstellar distances or communication protocols that accommodate temporal delays while maintaining operational effectiveness across distributed command structures. Both possibilities represent technological achievements that exceed human capabilities for coordinating operations across even terrestrial distances. Military communication networks struggle to maintain synchronization across continental ranges due to signal propagation delays and equipment limitations. Maintaining coordination across interstellar distances while accommodating relativistic effects represents computational and engineering challenges that transcend current human technological understanding. The systematic revelation of communication capabilities as energy availability increases confirms that 3i Atlas operates according to mission profiles designed for maximum operational security during approach phases. By revealing only baseline capabilities until optimal conditions are achieved, the object has prevented effective analysis of its full technological potential while maintaining communication security that protects operational objectives until execution becomes inevitable. This approach indicates military rather than scientific mission architecture. Scientific expeditions typically maximize communication and data sharing to enhance research effectiveness and international cooperation. Military operations maintain communication security until operational requirements demand capability demonstration. The patterns we're observing from 3i Atlas follow military operational security protocols rather than scientific transparency standards. The implications extend beyond individual platform assessment into strategic considerations about coordinated operations that might involve communication networks spanning multiple star systems. If 3i Atlas represents one element in interstellar intelligence operations, then its communications might be coordinating activities that transcend our solar system and involve civilizations operating at galactic scales. Current projections indicate that 3i Atlas will achieve maximum communication capability during the period from November 18th through December 2nd, 2025, when solar energy availability peaks and transmission systems can operate at full effectiveness. The electromagnetic signatures we've detected represent only preliminary operations using minimal available power. At perihelion, communication systems could achieve broadcast strength that reaches receivers across significant portions of the local galactic region. The mathematical precision of this timing suggests that whatever intelligence designed 3i Atlas calculated optimal conditions for interstellar communication that coincide with perihelion energy availability. The coordination required for such precise mission timing across interstellar distances represents planning capabilities that operate according to temporal scales and computational resources that dwarf human strategic planning by orders of magnitude. As we approach the moment when maximum communication capability becomes available, humanity faces the possibility of witnessing information transfer that operates according to principles we can observe but cannot comprehend. The electromagnetic emissions might contain detailed intelligence about our solar system, assessments of human technological capabilities, or coordination instructions for activities that transcend our current understanding of what's possible. The evidence continues accumulating that 3i Atlas represents technology rather than natural phenomena. The communication capabilities, energy systems, and coordination protocols demonstrate artificial intelligence operating according to principles that challenge fundamental assumptions about what interstellar visitors should possess. The institutional responses suggest that classified assessments have reached similar conclusions about the object's technological rather than natural origins. The question facing humanity is whether these communication systems represent opportunities for peaceful contact with interstellar civilization or coordination mechanisms for operations that conflict with human survival and security. The evidence suggests both possibilities remain viable until 3i Atlas's true mission objectives become apparent through actions rather than speculation. The countdown to maximum communication capability continues with relentless precision. The electromagnetic emissions intensify according to energy availability schedules that operate outside human control or influence. And somewhere in the space between transmission and reception, intelligence beyond our current understanding prepares for communication events that might reshape human knowledge of what's possible among the stars. The next phase of this investigation will determine whether the communication capabilities we're observing herald humanity's introduction to galactic civilization or represent coordination mechanisms for challenges that test our species' adaptability and survival. The timeline is fixed by orbital mechanics and energy physics that no human decision can alter. The capabilities continue revealing themselves according to schedules that accommodate neither diplomatic initiatives nor military preparations. The only variables are the true intentions behind 3i Atlas's communication systems and whether humanity possesses the technological and organizational resources necessary for appropriate responses to whatever those communications might reveal. The evidence suggests we're about to discover whether we're alone in the universe or whether we've always been observed by intelligence that operates according to principles we're only beginning to recognize. The electromagnetic transmissions continue, the coordination intensifies, and humanity prepares for communication events that could transform our understanding of intelligence, technology, and our place in a cosmos that may be far more connected and monitored than we ever dared to imagine. The institutional silence surrounding 3i Atlas has now reached levels that suggest coordinated suppression of information that could fundamentally alter humanity's understanding of our cosmic environment. What began as routine delays in data publication has evolved into systematic withholding of observations that multiple independent sources confirm contain evidence of artificial rather than natural origins. The implications extend beyond scientific curiosity into domains that challenge every assumption we hold about planetary security and our species' preparedness for contact with non-human intelligence. Dr. Catherine Morris at the European Space Agency's Mars Operations Centre has been conducting unauthorised analysis of spectroscopic data collected during 3i Atlas's October flyby of the Red Planet. Her findings, shared through encrypted channels after official publication was indefinitely delayed, reveal isotopic signatures that violate every known model of natural comet formation. The deuterium to hydrogen ratios she's measured don't match any stellar environment where natural ice could condense, suggesting artificial synthesis rather than primordial formation. Morris's analysis indicates that the hydrogen cyanide emissions contain isotopic fingerprints consistent with industrial chemistry rather than stellar nucleosynthesis. The ratios require controlled nuclear processes that don't occur in natural environments, implying manufacturing capabilities that exceed anything humans have achieved for space-based chemical production. We're not observing natural sublimation of primordial ice. We're witnessing active production of complex compounds using technologies that operate outside our current understanding of what's possible in space environments. The spectroscopic data also reveals trace compounds that don't exist in natural solar system materials. Morris has identified molecular signatures that correspond to no known chemical processes, suggesting either exotic matter states or artificially synthesized materials that require technological capabilities transcending human industrial chemistry. Such findings would confirm artificial rather than natural origins. But Morris's results remain locked in institutional review processes that show no signs of resolution. Independent verification attempts have been systematically blocked through access restrictions that prevent civilian researchers from obtaining the high-resolution data necessary for confirmation. Dr. Lisa Zhang at Caltech reports that her requests for European Space Agency spectroscopic archives have been denied, citing data validation requirements that weren't applicable to similar requests made before 3i Atlas's discovery. The selective access restrictions suggest that institutional gatekeepers recognize the revolutionary implications of what Morris has discovered. Amateur astronomers using modest equipment have attempted their own spectroscopic observations, but the resolution limitations of privately operated systems prevent detection of the isotopic anomalies that require eyes. The circular professional-grade instruments to character nature of this situation effectively prevents independent confirmation, while official sources maintain silence about results that could reshape our understanding of what's visiting our solar system. Meanwhile, 3i Atlas continues demonstrating behaviors that accumulate into undeniable evidence of artificial control systems operating according to mission profiles that optimize effectiveness during perihelion passage. The trajectory modifications have intensified to the point where course corrections now occur every 36 to 48 hours, with precision that exceeds human spacecraft navigation by orders of magnitude while consuming no detectable reaction mass. Dr. Robert Kim at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory has been tracking these maneuvers using data from multiple observation stations worldwide. His analysis reveals velocity changes that require thrust applications lasting exactly 23 seconds per correction cycle, with timing precision that eliminates natural outgassing as an explanation. Chemical sublimation doesn't operate according to such rigid schedules. Only engineered systems execute maneuvers with clockwork regularity that maintains navigational accuracy across interplanetary distances. Kim's tracking data also confirms that 3i Atlas is actively steering toward orbital geometries that optimize weapons effectiveness during perihelion approach. Rather than following random gravitational mechanics, the object is positioning itself for maximum engagement opportunity with Earth's satellite infrastructure during the period when solar energy availability peaks and chemical weapons production reaches maximum capability. The targeting implications become undeniable when you examine the specific orbital parameters that 3I Atlas is achieving through these course corrections. The object will reach optimal firing positions for directed chemical weapons during a 58-hour window spanning November the 21st through 24th, 2025. The geometric relationships during this period would allow concentrated emissions to intercept satellite orbits with minimal dispersion losses, creating persistent contamination zones that could disable space-based infrastructure for months. But the most alarming development comes from classified surveillance networks that have detected electromagnetic signatures indicating preparation for weapons deployment rather than continued approach maneuvers. Dr. Jennifer Liu at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory reports through unofficial channels that space-based monitoring assets have identified weapons systems activation protocols operating aboard 3I Atlas with increasing frequency as energy availability approaches maximum levels. Liu's observations indicate that the electromagnetic activity patterns have shifted from communication-focused transmissions to what military analysts recognize as target acquisition and fire control sequences. The power signatures suggest charging cycles for directed energy systems that operate at effectiveness levels exceeding anything humans have deployed for space-based weapons applications. We're witnessing preparation for combat operations rather than scientific observation activities. The weapon signatures correlate precisely with hydrogen cyanide production cycles, suggesting integrated systems that coordinate chemical and electromagnetic weapons for maximum tactical effectiveness. Rather, 3I Atlas appears to, than operating as separate capabilities, possess unified weapons architecture that treats chemical emissions and directed energy as components of coordinated attack systems designed for engagement across multiple threat domains simultaneously. Military toxicology assessments conducted by the Defense Threat Reduction Agency have upgraded their classification of 3I Atlas's chemical emissions from environmental hazard to active weapons threat based on concentration patterns that indicate tactical rather than random deployment. The hydrogen cyanide releases now follow targeting algorithms that optimize delivery to specific orbital zones while minimizing waste through dispersion effects. Dr. Sarah Martinez at the Army Research Laboratory has been modeling chemical weapons effectiveness using atmospheric simulation software originally developed for nuclear fallout analysis. Her calculations reveal that concentrated releases during optimal geometry windows could achieve lethality thresholds, dangerous to crew operations aboard the International Space Station, commercial satellites, and military reconnaissance platforms operating in targeted orbital zones. Martinez's models indicate that 3I Atlas possesses sufficient chemical production capability to deny access to critical orbital regions around Earth through persistent contamination that remains hazardous for extended periods. The implications transform routine space operations into life-threatening activities that could suspend human presence in space indefinitely if chemical clouds achieve projected concentration levels. The weapons deployment timeline correlates with solar energy availability schedules that reach maximum intensity during perihelion passage. At current production rates, 3I Atlas generates sufficient chemical weapons material to threaten individual spacecraft or small satellite constellations. When solar power increases by an order of magnitude during closest approach, chemical production could scale proportionally to levels that threaten entire orbital infrastructures simultaneously. Dr. Michael Chen at the National Reconnaissance Office has been analyzing targeting patterns that suggest 3I Atlas has acquired detailed intelligence about human space assets through surveillance capabilities that exceed our ability to detect or counter. The object's approach trajectory optimizes engagement opportunities with GPS satellites, communication relays, and reconnaissance platforms in sequences that indicate comprehensive knowledge of orbital deployment patterns and operational schedules. Chen's analysis reveals that 3I Atlas will achieve line-of-sight access to critical satellite constellations according to timing that maximizes tactical effectiveness while minimizing exposure to potential countermeasures. The precision required for such targeting calculations demands real-time intelligence about satellite positions, orbital mechanics, and operational status that could only be obtained through surveillance networks we haven't detected. The surveillance implications suggest that 3IR Atlas operates as part of distributed intelligence systems that have been monitoring human space activities for extended periods before the object's discovery. The detailed knowledge required for precision targeting could only be accumulated through long-term observation, conducted by platforms that maintained concealment throughout the intelligence-gathering phase. If multiple artificial objects have been operating within our solar system while avoiding detection by human observation networks, then 3I Atlas might represent the activation phase of operations that involved years or decades of preparatory surveillance. The sudden revelation of artificial capabilities could indicate mission transition from reconnaissance to active engagement, according to predetermined schedules that optimize tactical surprise. Dr. Amanda Foster at MIT has been investigating detection methodologies that might reveal additional artificial objects operating within our solar system, using techniques adapted from military surveillance applications. Her preliminary findings suggest gravitational anomalies and electromagnetic signatures that might indicate at least 2 additional objects maneuvering within Earth's orbital vicinity, while maintaining stealth characteristics that prevent visual identification. Foster's analysis indicates that these potential additional objects have been making subtle course corrections that coordinate with 3I Atlas's approach schedule, suggesting fleet-level coordination rather than individual platform operations. The implications transform threat assessment from single object analysis to coordinated attack scenarios that could overwhelm defensive capabilities through simultaneous engagement across multiple vectors. The electromagnetic coordination between potential fleet elements operates using communication protocols that exceed human capability for real-time coordination across interplanetary distances. The precision required for synchronized operations while maintaining operational security suggests technological capabilities that transcend current understanding of what's possible for space-based coordination systems. International response patterns indicate that classified intelligence assessments have confirmed fleet-level threats that require coordinated defensive preparations across national boundaries that typically compete rather than cooperate for space-based resources. Dr. Patricia Williams at the Congressional Research Service reports emergency funding approvals for space defense systems that weren't requested through normal appropriations processes. Williams' analysis reveals budget allocations for asymmetric threat response capabilities that exceed funding levels justified by known natural hazards. The spending patterns suggest preparation for scenarios that involve artificial rather than natural threats operating at technological levels that require revolutionary rather than incremental defensive responses. Commercial space companies have implemented operational changes that indicate threat briefings at corporate leadership levels regarding scenarios that could affect satellite operations, crewed missions, and space-based manufacturing activities. SpaceX has expedited redundancy improvements across Starlink constellations. Boeing has restructured International Space Station crew rotation schedules. Blue Origin has modified manufacturing timelines to prioritize defensive rather than exploratory capabilities. These commercial responses suggest that classified threat assessments have been shared with industry leaders whose operations could be affected by space-based conflicts involving capabilities that exceed conventional threat models. The coordination indicates government recognition that defending against advanced artificial threats requires private sector cooperation at levels that blur traditional boundaries between civilian and military space activities. Dr. Robert Stone at the Air Force Research Laboratory has been developing response scenarios using strategic planning methodologies adapted from nuclear warfare doctrine. His analysis, leaked through defense intelligence channels, suggests that conventional space defense measures would be marginally effective at best against the technological capabilities that 3I Atlas demonstrates through its weapon systems, propulsion technology, and fleet coordination abilities. Stone's findings indicate that any civilization capable of interstellar travel while maintaining weapons effectiveness upon arrival possesses technological advantages so significant that traditional deterrent strategies become counterproductive. Aggressive responses might provoke retaliation that eliminates human space infrastructure entirely, while passive responses might signal vulnerability that invites systematic exploitation of technological superiority. The strategic dilemmas have no precedent because they involve capabilities that exceed human technology by generational gaps rather than incremental improvements. When facing opponents with advanced energy systems, exotic propulsion mechanisms, and weapons that operate outside known physics, conventional concepts of space warfare become obsolete regardless of resource allocation or tactical innovation. Time constraints imposed by 3E-Atlas's approach schedule compound these strategic challenges by requiring response decisions within weeks, rather than the years typically needed for major defense system development and deployment. Whatever preparations are implemented must achieve operational capability before perihelion conditions enable maximum weapons effectiveness, according to schedules that accommodate neither human decision-making processes nor technological development timelines. The countdown continues with mathematical precision that operates outside human control or influence. 3I-Atlas approaches maximum energy availability according to orbital mechanics that will enable full weapons capability regardless of diplomatic initiatives, defensive preparations, or international coordination efforts. The evidence accumulated through systematic observation confirms artificial origins, weapons development, and fleet coordination that challenge every assumption about planetary security. The institutional silence surrounding these developments suggests that classified assessments have reached conclusions about artificial threats that require security classifications preventing public disclosure until operational responses can be implemented. The systematic suppression of spectroscopic data, electromagnetic observations, and trajectory analysis indicates coordination between intelligence agencies and space organizations at levels that transcend normal information sharing protocols. As we approach the critical period when 3I-Atlas achieves maximum operational capability, the evidence points toward weapons deployment against human space infrastructure, using technologies that exceed our ability to defend or retaliate effectively. The preparations we're observing from military and civilian space organizations suggest recognition that November 2025 might mark humanity's first experience with interstellar warfare rather than peaceful contact with advanced civilization. The next phase of this investigation will determine whether the artificial intelligence behind 3I-Atlas seeks to disable human space capabilities as preparation for broader objectives, or whether the weapon systems represent defensive measures against responses it anticipates from primitive but potentially unpredictable technological species. The timeline for answers approaches rapidly according to schedules that no human decision can alter. The mathematical precision of weapons targeting, the systematic revelation of capabilities, and the apparent fleet coordination suggest planning conducted across timescales that exceed human strategic thinking by orders of magnitude. We are witnessing execution of military operations designed by intelligence that operates according to principles we're only beginning to recognize through their technological demonstrations. The evidence continues accumulating that humanity faces its first encounter with interstellar military technology rather than scientific exploration. The question now is whether our species possesses the adaptability and resources necessary for survival when confronted with capabilities that transcend our current understanding of what's possible among the stars. The countdown to weapons deployment continues with relentless precision. The targeting systems activate according to energy schedules that approach maximum effectiveness, and somewhere in the space between preparation and execution, the future of human space civilization hangs in the balance, waiting to discover whether we're witnessing first contact or final warning about our place in a universe far more dangerous than we ever imagined. The evidence is overwhelming, the timeline is fixed, the capabilities are undeniable. What we've witnessed over the past months isn't the approach of a natural comet from interstellar space. We've been documenting the systematic activation and targeting of humanity's first confirmed encounter with artificial intelligence operating at technological levels that dwarf our current understanding of what's possible. 3I-Atlas has demonstrated precision navigation that exceeds human spacecraft guidance by orders of magnitude. It's producing chemical weapons at industrial scales using processes that violate known physics. It's coordinating with additional artificial objects through communication networks that operate outside our detection capabilities, and it's steering toward orbital configurations that optimize weapons effectiveness against our satellite infrastructure during the exact period when solar energy availability peaks. The institutional silence, the data suppression, the coordinated defensive preparations across multiple nations all confirm that classified assessments have reached the same conclusion we've documented through independent analysis. This isn't a scientific curiosity requiring careful study. This is an active threat requiring immediate response using capabilities we may not possess. As 3I-Atlas approaches perihelion in the coming weeks, we face the possibility that humanity's first contact with interstellar technology will be remembered not as a moment of scientific triumph, but as the day our species learned we're not alone in a universe far more dangerous than we ever dared imagine. The countdown continues, the targeting systems activate, and the future of human civilization in space hangs in the balance. Keep watching the skies, keep asking questions, keep demanding answers, because what happens next will determine whether humanity survives its introduction to galactic civilization or becomes another cautionary tale about primitive species that encountered intelligence they weren't prepared to understand.